Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend. The MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the move of what if Deku came back from the dead with a quirk? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. He was cold, he was shivering, and he didn't know where he was. It was dark outside, raining, and the mud was up to his ankles. He had to get inside. He couldn't remember how he got here. A pulsing pain screamed through his temple. Scratch that. Thinking could happen later. Remembering hurt too much right now. He managed his way to the building. He didn't know what it was, but maybe someone could help him. Somehow he managed to get in, but he was barefoot on top of it all. His feet made loud slapping sounds as he walked on the stone-cold tiles. He collapsed onto the floor. When he woke up, he was in a hospital. Or at least, that's what he thought. It didn't really matter, not really, just because he was somewhere and they were taking care of him. He flinched when he noticed two people talking at the foot of his bed. On was a tall man dressed in black, wearing a gray scarf that covered the lower half of his face. And the other? No, that couldn't be right. "I'm dreaming," he said, shocked at how gravelly his voice sounded. "This is a dream." One of the men, the one with dark hair and dark clothing, snapped his head up. The lower part of his chin was covered by his scarf. "Kid, you're awake." "Nope, I don't think so." The man tilted his head like a cat. "Why don't you think so?" "Because if I'm not hallucinating, All Might is here," he said with a chuckle. "This can't not be a dream. Do you remember your name, kid?" "Izuku Midoriya." "Do you know where my mom is?" He doesn't like the uncomfortable silence that follows. When Aizawa told Bakugo to come to the nurse's office, he'd assumed it was some sort of routine checkup. Then again, none of the other students needed to go. As he followed his teacher, he couldn't help but notice the tension in his shoulders. It didn't instill any confidence in his heart. They stopped right in front of the door, and Aizawa froze, turning to meet Katsuki's face. He could hear something. It was mostly muffled by the door, but still, was that sobbing? "Aizawa-sensei, why did you take me here?" He buried his head in his hands, as if he was trying to physically wipe the tiredness from his eyes. "I think seeing would be better than telling you." The door opened with a metallic creak. Katsuki swallowed the lump forming in his throat. He wasn't scared, not really, but he couldn't let Aizawa's uneasiness go unnoticed. On the bed, All Might was hugging someone. He couldn't see their face, not from behind All Might's hulking figure, so he started walking closer. He could hear the sobbing now, the full force of it, and it sounded familiar. Too familiar. He could see the boy's hair now. It was green. It was green, almost like Deku? He didn't recognize the voice that came out of his own mouth. It was like a coarse whisper. The boy turned to him, and he was met with the wide, tearful eyes that he'd known so well. The eyes that seemed too large for his small face. "Kaken?" he whispered. His face was soaked with tears. Katsuki walked over and Izuku instinctively flinched back, shielding his face from a potential explosion. But Katsuki only hugged him. "Don't ever do that again, you damn nerd," he said, trying to talk through his own tears. "I thought you died. But my mom did." "Kaken, my mom?" He was cut off by the sound of his own sobbing. "Deku, how are you here? You died months ago. I went to your funeral, but you're here. What exactly happened?" "That's what we're trying to figure out." Katsuki wanted to jump out of his skin. He'd forgotten Aizawa was there at all. "I don't have a house, I don't have money, I don't have my mom dash. That's why you're staying here. At Yue?" Izuku's teary eyes got even wider, if that was even possible. "You'll be here so we can observe you. We detected that you don't have a quirk, but here's the thing. People normally don't come back from the dead. So we need to make sure you're okay. You'll be sitting in with Class 1 as lectures dash. But I never even got the chance to pass the exam. It wouldn't be as a student." "But," he said, putting a hand on his shoulder, "that doesn't mean you can't learn what I'm teaching." It was 6 months ago, actually. 6 months ago when Izuku's whole life changed for the worse. He was walking back from school, trying to brush the ashes from his hero notebook, trying to forget what Kaken had said. "A swan dive?" Izuku shook his head. Best not to dwell on it. It was time to ignore it just like the rest of his problems. That was when it happened. He heard it first, the explosive force of a crumbling building. Then it was the smell of fire, burning clothing, screams in the air. All Might standing against a villain who he was losing to. Izuku hid behind a piece of rubble, trying not to notice the stain of blood on it. His apartment complex was on fire. What if his neighbors were still there? His mom was still there. Throwing caution to the wind, he ran towards the fight, towards the fire and the ash and the rubble. "It's over, all for one," growled All Might with a grimace. In any other situation, Izuku would have been starstruck, but he didn't have time for that. He had to find his mom. He had to know she was safe. But then he noticed something, a tuft of hair sticking out from behind a pile of stone. He made his way over and found two kids, a brother and sister, hugging each other. He helped guide them safely through the maze of rubble and fire, and that was when he saw it. The villain All for One had punched a hole through All Might's stomach. Against his better judgment, he ran towards the villain in an angry rage. All for One turned to Izuku, placed a hand on his chest. That was the day Izuku Midoriya had died. "Young Midoriya, how did you sleep?" Izuku slowly opened one eye. His arms felt leaden, like they were weighed down, and his muscles ached. He honestly wished he were still asleep. Like the dead. He was awake enough that the cloudiness in his vision was gone, just in time to see the smile fall from All Might's face. He felt a twinge of guilt, only before laughing at his own joke. He felt like All Might seemed to relax a little after that. There was a knock at the door and All Might appeared to be glad for the distraction. "Now I wonder who that could be?" The words came out before he could process them. "It's Kaken. He's angry." All Might's eyebrow quirked upwards in surprise, but before he could say anything, the door was thrown open, and standing in the doorframe was Bakugo. He was wearing his hero costume, but that wasn't the first thing Izuku noticed. It was the angry, maniacal expression on his face. If looks could kill, the entire downtown area would be gone. He looked at Izuku, and that energy shifted, like he was still angry, but it wasn't on the forefront of his mind anymore. "Deku." It wasn't a question or a greeting, it was more like, "Hey, I know you're there, you damn nerd, and I won't admit it, but I'm worried. I'm too pissed right now to talk, I just don't want you to think I'm ignoring you." Izuku was a little confused. He was inferring a lot of things just by looking at Kaken. He wondered if this is what it's like for a blind man to see. "All Might, I need to talk to you. It's about the grape juice." Izuku couldn't help but laugh. It was like trying to say it's bubbles when you're mad. But with one look at Bakugo, he knew that the rage was back and it wasn't going anywhere. Izuku put a hand on his mouth self-consciously, but Kaken wasn't paying attention to him anymore. "You're talking about Minetta, isn't that right?" All Might was smiling and still had that iconic bold posture, but Izuku sensed something more along the lines of, "I know you're angry, son, but I don't want you to do anything reckless. I don't know what your classmate has done, but I don't want you to murder him. And I don't want your anger turned on to me either. Because I'm not as strong as—" "Hey there, problem child. You alright?" It was Aizawa. He was a mystery yesterday, but now Izuku felt like he understood him perfectly now. The tough exterior that hid his soft side, the serious nature and reluctance to enjoy humor. That question was more like, "I'm really worried about you, but I don't know how to say it. We're really confused because we don't know how you're alive, and we don't know if you even have a quirk." "I'm good," Izuku said with a wince. "What do you know about empath quirks?" "Empath? Why are you asking?" "I think I might have it. But it's not like any of the ones I've analyzed. I really don't know how to explain it, or if I'm going insane, or high on pain meds, or what if I'm actually in a coma or something and this is just a hallucination or dash. Stop muttering. What am I feeling right now?" "You're trying to keep your feelings blank right now, but it's not really working. You're worried about me, you don't understand how I could have a quirk, but you also don't understand how I can't have a quirk, but it doesn't make sense because empathy quirks don't have anything to do with death. Also you're chronically tired, you're angry that All Might is a teacher when he can't even take care of himself, you're a little confused because this is lining up with your emotions, and now you're starting to believe dash. I think you made your point." Izuku put his fingers on his temples, trying to press out the dull pain ringing through his head. "You can't turn it off easily, can you?" "No. How do you know these things? How are you finding out about it? It's like there's this energy around a person. I saw it around Kaken before he even came in the room dash. So it's visually based? Midoriya paused. Oh, I don't know how to describe it. It's like I've lived my life without hearing anything, and now dash. It's like, Aizawa pressed. Another sense, I guess. A sixth sense. How appropriate, given the circumstances. Aizawa gave a wry smile, a little ashamed at the ill-timed attempt at humor. He stared into Midoriya's two big eyes, afraid, for a moment, that he'd offended him. Then he began to laugh. He swears, this kid's smile was pure sunshine. I didn't know you were funny, sir. Don't let that get out, problem child. I have a reputation, you know. And you can call me Aizawa-sensei. You might not be an official student, but I'll still be your teacher. Follow me. It was a bit surreal, walking through the halls of UA. It was always Izuku's dream to go here, quirk or no quirk, and even though everyone else doubted him, he'd always had his mother's support. His mother, he didn't want to think about her right now. It took him a minute to see Aizawa staring at him with a blank expression. Of course, he really feels bad for the kid. He lost his mom and he's trying to act strong and there's really nothing I can do for him and… Go ahead, he said, pointing to the door. I'll give you a few minutes of a head start. And one more thing, I wouldn't tell them why you're here. Just give them the excuse that I'm observing your quirk. It could get complicated if you're not careful. Midoriya didn't know what that meant, but it was Aizawa, so he knew better than to dwell on it. He had no idea where to sit. Well, to be honest, he didn't feel like he should be there at all. He was only at UA because Aizawa-sensei needs to monitor his quirk and because All Might felt guilty he died. He could feel the guilt coming off in waves even after he left the hospital room. He shuffled to the back of the class like he always does, keeping his head down, like he always does. He resigns himself to being quiet in the back of the class, like he always does. He shouldn't be here. Hi there. He picked up his head and was met with 3 smiling faces. A girl, with short brown hair and a sweet smile, a guy with spiky red hair, and a guy with wavy blonde hair stood in front of his desk. Hi. Congratulations on getting into UA. I'm Uraraka, this is Kirishima, and this is Kaminari. What's your name? Oh my gosh, he's really nervous, I should probably talk to him, I don't want him to be lonely on his first day, also he's kind of cute. I wonder if he dyed his hair or… Oh, I didn't get into you, he blurted before he could stop himself. He shut his eyes with embarrassment. I mean, I'm just observing the class, I'm not a student, I'm Izuku Midoriya by the way. The girl laughed. Hi, nice to meet you. Bro, you're at UA without being a student? That's so manly. Wow, I wonder why he's here, he must be super smart or something. That's really cool, dude. So you're still taking the classes with us? Why would you do more homework? What is wrong with him? I mean, he seems nice, but I mean, come on. Everyone please get to your seats, this is an esteemed school. Do not disrespect the honor. The boy with the glasses paused. His choppy hand movements stopped midair. He glared at Izuku. Who the fuck is that? Why in God's name is there another student? Did they expel that perv and replace him already? It's about damn time, but this new kid doesn't look like anything special. Is the admissions team on drugs? Midoriya couldn't help but laugh out loud. He clapped a hand over his mouth with a loud slap. The emotions he was giving out were so different from what he conveyed outwardly. He started to walk over and suddenly, Izuku stopped laughing. It wasn't as funny anymore, not with him towering over him. Hello, my name is Tenya Iida. May I ask as to why you are sitting with class 1A? Oh hi. Well, I'm not exactly a student. I got my quirk recently and Aizawa-sensei is monitoring me? To figure it out, I don't know what it does. Oh, don't get nervous. Iida's a little intimidating at first, but he's really nice. Why aren't you in your seats? It wasn't a question, not really. All right, students, time to give you a mini heart attack. You're going to think I'm really mad at you when I'm just having too much fun messing with you. Kaminari nudged Izuku in the shoulder, desperately pointing his eyes towards Aizawa. Midoriya? You good with that? Izuku felt his face flush. Sorry, Aizawa-sensei, would you mind repeating that? A girl with pink skin and horns bursted out laughing, as well as someone he couldn't see at all. He sunk deeper into his chair, trying to ignore Bakugo shaking his head. A boy with purple hair rolled his eyes tiredly, as the other boy with purple hair chuckled too loud. And was he wearing a diaper? Midoriya, I want you to analyze all of their quirks. Find their strengths, weaknesses. Can you do that while they're practicing? Yes, sir. It turns out most of the analyses were really straightforward. Hagakure's quirkless when it comes to fighting, but she'd be great for stealth missions. Kirishima's really strong, but needs to increase the amount he can harden in order to be more successful. Bakugo and Todoroki were incredibly skilled, but a little too overzealous, and by extension, a little reckless. Kota is limited by the amount of animals nearby. Sato is limited by availability of sugar. Uraraka needs to increase her limits. Kaminari needs more control. Aoyama needs to vary his attacks. Ojiro is very skilled with martial arts, but that is all he has. Jiro and Shoji are incredibly skilled, but need better spur-of-the-moment thinking, and Minetta needs to remember to think at all. Siro and Tokoyami need to work on their range, and Iida and Tsuyu need endurance. It was Momo Yaoyorozu that confused Izuku. She was obviously intelligent. She had to be, in order to create materials out of nothing. But she was also able to increase her strength and speed. The two abilities seemed incredibly different, and she seemed more comfortable with her creation quirk. After training, the first thing Izuku did was find All Might. I'm sorry, I can't talk right now, young Midoriya. I'm out of time. I don't want to reject him, but he can't know. He'll think less of me. Why are you worried about what I'm going to think of you? He said, before he could stop the words from leaving his mouth. All Might's eyes widened in shock. I may or may not have an empath quirk. Also, I need to talk to you about All for One, he blurted clumsily. Without warning, All Might grabbed his shoulder and dragged him into Recovery Girl's office. For lack of a better word, he deflated into a skeletal form. He coughed into his hand, wiping it on his shirt, hoping Midoriya wouldn't notice the blood. But he knew he'd see the blood. The kid was observant. I'm sorry, young Midoriya. I didn't want you to have to see me like this. All Might wouldn't lift his eyes to meet Izuku's. All Might, sir? Is this because of your fight with All for One? He said, trying to ignore the tortured look on his idol's face. He sure as hell wasn't smiling. I saw him punch you. Well, I saw him punch through you. All Might closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Yes, that's why I'm like this now. Is that what you wanted to talk about? He said shortly. It wasn't angry, but it was an incredibly tired string of words. No, it was actually about one of the students. I don't know much about All for One, but is it possible? Is what possible? Is it possible he forced Yaoyorozu to take another quirk? All Might laughed lightly. You had me worried for a second. Let me tell you about my quirk. It's called One for All. It was safe to say that Midoriya had never been more wrong in his life. After the first day of classes, Izuku was starting to feel like he belonged. Uraraka, Kirishima, and Iida, somewhat reluctantly, ate lunch with him. He felt welcomed, save for a few of Iida's comments and a couple of glares from Shinso, but Kaminari would always nudge him in the shoulder and give a goofy wave, which made Izuku feel a little better. And then came the nightmare. It was normal at first, just memories of the villain attack, incoherent swirls of blood and fire, screams from the rubble, the scent of burnt rubber and skin, memories that he pretended weren't his. They ended when All for One placed his hand on Izuku's chest. That was what happened, that's what he remembered. The problems came when he started remembering how he died. When Recovery Girl followed All Might into the infirmary, she thought the place had been robbed. Drawers thrown open. Medical supplies scattered across the floor. Folders and papers thrown about as if there'd been a small hurricane in the room. She'd rushed over to Izuku, who was twitching in a restless sleep. His skin was clammy and feverish to the touch. She gently shook him awake. Young Midoriya, are you feeling all right? All Might was standing in the corner of the room in his skeletal form, looking even paler than usual. What do you think? He said wryly, not opening his eyes. His voice was a dry croak. All Might and Recovery Girl shared an uneasy glance. All Might, you don't have to feel so guilty all of the time, it kind of makes me nauseous. There was a shocking bitterness laced in his voice. like barbed wire sticking through wool. He furrowed his eyebrows, still refusing to open his eyes, as if opening them would make everything he saw real. Midoriya? I can feel the emotions coming off of you, the guilt, the pity, it's overwhelming. Oh, and here comes the shock, the surprise. Did you already forget I sense your emotions? Young Midoriya, what happened since we spoke yesterday? Finally, he opened up his eyes and All Might saw an expression that should never be on the face of a child. The absolute, sheer terror was enough to shatter the old man's heart. Mr. Aizawa walked into the room, his eyes pleading with a silent question. I remember how I died. How I was murdered. And how I got here. Do you want to talk about it? Aizawa said, sparing All Might from finding the courage to speak. His tone was flat and his face was blank, but only an idiot would think he didn't want to know. And no, I don't. But I need to. I have to. I don't think I can handle this by myself. Izuku was about to fall apart at the seams, and they all knew it. All for one killed me with a quirk that shattered my bones, one by one, until my body couldn't take it anymore. He'd said it slowly, but winced as if each word were a stab to the gut. His tone was painfully apathetic and factual. The three teachers didn't dare breathe after a declaration like that. How could they? And I woke up in my grave. Had to claw out. I walked here. His tone was clipped, but at this point, tears were already streaming down his face. All Might, would you do me a favor and get Nomuri to come over here? Who's that? Midoriya barely choked out through sobs. She's got a quirk that puts people to sleep. Midoriya moved so suddenly that Aizawa didn't have the chance to react. He gripped his scarf with trembling, desperate hands. He stared him right in the face with an expression of paralyzed fear. I can't live that again. I know, problem child. Her sleep is dreamless. I thought of that already. Midoriya collapsed from exhaustion, quietly sobbing into the pillow. He briefly registered a woman in sweats walking into the room and speaking in a hushed tone with Aizawa. He saw a soft pink mist and fell into a mindless sleep. When he opened his eyes again, it was morning, and Mr. Aizawa was lying on the floor in his yellow sleeping bag, and the woman from last night was snoring in a chair near the foot of his bed. He looked at the clock, 10:17 a.m. He'd made Aizawa-sensei miss class. He was preventing the students from learning more, and it was all his fault. Midoriya, it's Saturday. You know that, right? Midoriya flinched. You're awake, sensei? I hadn't realized. It's a special skill of mine, he said with a mischievous smile. His expression was replaced with a genuine one in an instant. How are you feeling? And be honest, problem child. I'm feeling better than yesterday. It's just real to me now. Knowing that my mom could have died in just as horrible of a way. He was interrupted by a loud snore. Aizawa sighed, got out of his sleeping bag, and kicked the base of Nomuri's chair. What? Cats, she said, with wide eyes that were not awake. Nomuri, you were snoring. Oh, don't let that get out. It would ruin my whole sexy persona, she said, wiggling her eyebrows comically. Wait a minute, Midoriya said suddenly, you have a sleep quirk, right? He didn't wait for her to answer. You're midnight, right? She smiled, absent-mindedly wiping the drool from her chin. Oh yes, I don't usually look like this when I'm working. Call me Nomuri, Midoriya. He swallowed the lump in his throat. How much do you know? I know that you are struggling with nightmares. And that you went through something rough, but it doesn't matter what it is. I'll help if I can, and you don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. Aizawa wants me to help you sleep until we figure out what's up with your quirk, is that all right? Yes, that would be great, he said too quickly. We're missing one of our trio. Midoriya raised an eyebrow, interest piqued. Aizawa groaned and sunk to the floor. I dunno, don't you think Mike is a little too loud? Present Mike? You guys know him? Aizawa rubbed his temples. Spoke too soon on the too loud thing, problem child, didn't I? Izuku flushed. We were friends when we went to UA, explained Nomuri. I'm going to give him a call. And so the four of them spent the weekend, catching up, talking about quirks with Izuku, and eating ungodly amounts of food. A couple of times Recovery Girl and All Might dropped by, once with a very confused Yaoyorozu. But for the most part, it was quiet and peaceful. Aizawa had noticed that Midoriya wasn't as animated as usual and sometimes refused to talk at all, but Aizawa couldn't even begin to imagine what he was going through. He lost someone close to him too, but he hadn't died himself. And he was hoping that he wouldn't anytime soon. On Monday, he wasn't sure that it was a good idea for him to sit with the class. He still didn't know if Midoriya had any control over his quirk, though he hadn't used it since Friday, but he wasn't sure if interacting with students like Bakugo and Shinso was going to work out okay. He loved Shinso, he was close like a son to Aizawa, but he'd noticed the jealous glare Shinso had thrown Midoriya's way multiple times. But no, Midoriya wanted to go to class. Hey man, rough weekend? Kaminari was sitting on Midoriya's desk. Yeah, a bit. Dude, the guy seriously looks exhausted, I hope he's okay. Hey Midoriya. You were analyzing our quirks, right? Oh man, I hope this makes him feel better, he just looks so sad. Aizawa-sensei did mention that he likes talking about quirks, or was that Shinso? Oh yeah, your quirks are seriously amazing. Midoriya. He flinched at the touch of a hand on his shoulder. The clavicle would shatter first, then the ribs, one by one, snap, snap, snap. Weiss, he blustered, turning around to see eyes with circles deeper than his. I want to talk to you after class. It's important. Okay, Shinso. See you then. Shinso, you gotta stop scaring the new kid. Kaminari yelled. Shinso turned around and flipped the bird at him, but there was a trace of a smile on his face. Uraraka blinked, as if blinking would help her think. Hey Midoriya, can I ask you something a little personal? Oh my god, what if I'm overstepping my boundaries? This is the second day I've ever talked to him. Oh no, I'm messing everything up. Sure, what's up? Izuku said. What did he have to lose? Kirishima walked up and put an arm around her shoulders. Don't say anything too embarrassing. Midoriya, do you not like being touched? Izuku's eyes widened in surprise. I didn't mean to be rude, it's just that I saw how you reacted to Shinso, and sometimes I hug my friends and dash. No, don't worry about it. Actually, you're right, he admitted, failing to leave the bitterness from his voice, but it's a long story. And thank you for noticing. That was a really nice thing to do. Izuku spent the class period lost in thought. On one hand, Shinso wanted to talk to him. And while he didn't seem angry, not like Kaken used to be, anyway, he certainly didn't seem like he was trying to be friends. He also had no idea what his quirk was. He knew he didn't use it in the training on Friday, so that was also a little worrisome. But on the other hand, Kaminari and Uraraka especially were really considerate. They cared. Izuku wasn't sure if he'd ever had friends like that. Before he knew it, class was over, and Shinso was glaring daggers at him. Yeah, he definitely didn't want to be friends. He gave a wave to Uraraka before following Shinso to an empty classroom. Shinso sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. He kind of reminded Izuku of Aizawa. What's your deal? This was beginning to feel more like a Kaken-style confrontation. Midoriya felt the hair at the back of his neck prickle. Why are you here so easily when I had to fight tooth and nail to get in? Do you have any idea how hard it was, with a quirk like mine? What do you mean, exactly? He rolled his eyes. Look, maybe they've got you playing dumb. Whatever. Obviously you're valuable to Aizawa-sensei, otherwise why would you be having this special treatment? You're getting to learn at UA without the entrance exam. You might matter more to Aizawa than I do. Hold on, let me think. Of a lie. No. It's just, Aizawa-sensei is trying to figure out what my quirk is. I think that's all I can tell you. He won't like that. Shinso leapt forward and grabbed Izuku's arm. The radius would break, then the elbow. It would spread to the metacarpals of his hands, snapping in rapid-fire speed. Snap, snap, snap. Shinso froze and let go immediately. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Izuku started breathing. When had he stopped? It's okay. It wasn't, but he could tell that Shinso felt bad. So that's your quirk, huh? Shinso said, his breath condensing into a cloud in the air. Why was it so cold in there, anyway? The temperature felt like it had dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Midoriya stared at Shinso, wide-eyed. I don't know what's happening, he murmured. I don't think I made it cold. All of a sudden, the alarm system in the school started blaring. It was loud, so loud, like sirens. He remembered the fire engine's wails as all for one shattered him. "Hey, Midoriya," Shinso said, raising his hands to touch his shoulders. He dropped his hands to his knees, remembering. Those alarms are for the press. There isn't any danger. Izuku tried to breathe, or was he breathing too much? It was hard to tell. He couldn't think, not with the angry swirling of white noise pounding against the inside of his skull. The lights began to flicker wildly. "I think I'm having a panic attack," he gasped through erratic breaths. "Get Aizawa, Nomuri?" Shinso nodded, though the color was gone from his face. He ran through the hallways as the lights flickered like strobes. The alarm had been disabled, but something was messing with the lights. Maybe Kaminari? He burst into Mr. Aizawa's office in a panic. "It's Midoriya. He said he needs you and someone named Nomuri?" Without pausing, Aizawa grabbed Nomuri's arm and followed Shinso through the halls. The flickering got worse the closer they got to Midoriya. "Shinso, stay back, we don't understand his quirk yet." "But dash." Shinso dashed. "But it's my fault. Tell me about it later." "And stay back." Aizawa and Nomuri carefully stepped into the room. It was almost as cold as Todoroki's ice. Stray papers, desks, and office supplies were swirling around in a small cyclone. Midoriya was curled into a ball on the floor. From panic or pain, Shinso couldn't tell. "Midoriya, I need you to look at me. I need to erase your quirk." His voice was steady, but it wasn't calm. It was desperate. Midoriya opened his eyes, so green that they seemed to glow in the darkness of the classroom. Or maybe they were glowing. The light above him sparked out from too much electricity. Aizawa activated his quirk on Midoriya, effectively putting an end to the struggle. That's what should have happened. Except it didn't work. He couldn't erase Midoriya's quirk. "Nomuri," he shouted, hoping that would be enough of a command for her to understand. She pulled back her sleeve and Midoriya collapsed. The objects floating in the air clattered to the ground, the lights stopped flickering, and the temperature was back to normal. Shinso wasn't really sure what happened, but when he went back to class, Kaminari put it best. "Dude, you look like you've seen a ghost." Shinso couldn't help but feel nervous as he prepared to meet Midoriya. "Well, look what happened last time?" He gave him a panic attack, just because he was too jealous to think that Midoriya was going through his own stuff. He followed Aizawa through the door, where Midoriya was sitting on the edge of a hospital bed, looking a bit pale. He also had dark circles lining the bottom of his large green eyes. He was frowning, but when he looked at Shinso, his expression lit up. "Shinso." "Midoriya. Why did you want to see me?" He paused, looking down at his hands. "I wanted to apologize for yesterday. For putting you in danger with my quirk. Of course, I didn't know it was going to do that." Shinso walked over and took a seat opposite Midoriya. "If anyone's apologizing, it should be me." And Midoriya had the audacity to look surprised. Geez, he really was a goody two-shoes, wasn't he? Shinso wondered why Midoriya didn't hate him. "I didn't respect your boundaries, and because of that, you got hurt." "Oh, you didn't know. It's not your fault." "Yes, it is. I shouldn't have put my hands on you either way." Midoriya waved his hand as if this were normal. "Oh, that was nothing. You shouldn't be so forgiving," Shinso said, narrowing his eyes. He knew what it was like to brush aside the cruelness of others for his own sake. Except, it only served to hurt him. "You were bullied too." Shinso's eyes widened in shock. Sorry, part of my quirk is empathy. I didn't mean to pry, it's not something I can control yet. And if you don't mind me asking, what is your quirk?" It's just you didn't use it in training and dash." "I'm ashamed of it?" "Well, I don't understand how someone could dash. It's brainwashing. That's my quirk. It's a villain's quirk." Midoriya started laughing. He actually started laughing. Shinso continued to stare, dumbfounded, as he kept laughing. "Shinso, that's a hero's quirk. You could end battles without throwing one punch. You could end hostage situations and..." He trailed off, registering Shinso's conflicted expression. "No one's ever said anything like that to you, huh?" "No. They haven't," he said quietly. "What is your quirk, by the way?" "Oh, well, I have no idea. But the levitation part of my quirk that you, saw yesterday. It could have come from my mom. She had a telekinesis quirk. Shinso noticed how he said had, and how Midoriya's energy seemed depleted after mentioning his mom. He decided not to comment. Midoriya, I know you must hate me, but if you ever want someone to help you with your quirk, well, anything you need help with, don't hesitate to ask. He left the room before Midoriya had the chance to respond. Izuku was able to leave a little while later, and while he was glad to have the help, he was a bit anxious to get away from a very attentive recovery girl. He walked to the training grounds. That's where recovery girl had told him to go. Aizawa raised an eyebrow when he saw Midoriya, but his concentration shifted. He had to focus on looking grumpy even though Midoriya was smiling at him. Honestly, it wasn't easy. That kid's smiles were contagious. The students were sparring, a pair would fight, and the other students would comment after the match and critique their technique. Right now, Shoji and Hagakure were fighting, which in Izuku's opinion, was just about one of the best matchups. Shoji's senses would be set against Hagakure's stealth. Midoriya, what are you doing here? Aizawa-sensei. Recovery girl said I was all clear. He put his hand to his chin in thought. This could be a good idea, but it could be a very, very, very bad idea. I mean, we got to activate the kid's quirk, but I don't want him to be in danger, but I also don't want to endanger the other students. Aizawa-sensei, what are you planning? He had to wait for midnight to show up, and waiting wasn't helping the nerves. Midoriya was certain that if he'd eaten his lunch, he would have lost it. I mean, sure, he and Kaken weren't enemies, per se, but Aizawa-sensei didn't know their history. Alright class, I need you to listen up. Aizawa's announcement obliterated any conversations that were happening. He sighed, annoyed as usual, before he continued. Now I'm sure most of you have met Midoriya here. Izuku waved awkwardly. Uraraka giggled and waved back. He's not a student, but he's got a quirk that, frankly, we don't understand it. And my quirk doesn't work on it. He only just manifested this quirk, so we're working to try and figure out what's going on. Midoriya noticed Yaoyorozu's eyes light up in interest. Interesting, could it be an invisible quirk? Or perhaps a mutation, though it's strange for it to develop so late. So, earlier today, Midoriya accidentally activated his quirk to what we believe is the fullest extent while under stress. The alarms, murmured Tsu. Midoriya tried not to notice Shinso avoiding eye contact. So naturally, we need to know what's going on, but we need a good way to put him under stress dash. Which is why Midoriya will be fighting with Bakugo next, finished Midnight, who just walked over with present mic. Izuku couldn't help but see Katsuki's eyes widen in shock. Kirishima looked torn, before cheering both of them on, which made Izuku smile. Iida locked his eyes on him. Although I don't condone violence to help, I am afraid that there is no other option to help Midoriya dash. Dude, fuck him up. He's such a dick, so if you can, put him in his place, will you? He's just so arrogant and so loud that sometimes I wish I could punch him myself. Midoriya shook his head with a wonderstruck grin. He didn't think he'd ever get used to Iida's emotions. You ready, Deku? Katsuki said, definitely not ready himself. Oh god, what if I hurt him? He already died once. Yeah, Kaken, bring it on. He heard a bunch of snickers from the other students, but decided, for the sake of not being too embarrassed, to ignore it. Just like the rest of his problems. Bakugo's attacks started out pretty tame. It was mostly easy to dodge, small explosions, and Izuku avoided each one. But Katsuki wasn't stupid. He didn't let Izuku get a single hit in. And that's when he noticed it. Bakugo's rage started to overtake the desire to hold back. Damn it, you nerd. Why can't you just take the damn hit? I want him to cry like he used to. I want him to give up so he knows I'm the best there is. It was getting harder to dodge. A punch locked with the right side of Izuku's jaw. Finally. Just give up like the pathetic nerd you are. Worthless. Quirkless. Explosion. Deku. Izuku saw the next attack coming a mile away. It was a blast that he'd have to charge up, which meant it took longer. He grabbed Bakugo's wrist and kneed him in the stomach. He howled with rage. Oh, you're going to pay for that, you damn nerd. You don't have any idea what's coming. Actually, I think I do. He's not sure what made him do it. Maybe some of Kaken's rage had rubbed off on him. Or maybe he was tired. Maybe he was just so tired that he couldn't handle it anymore. I know what your explosions feel like, Kaken. And I know what you'd say too. You'd call me worthless, a waste of space. Throw a punch. It missed, but that's okay. What the hell are you talking about, you damn idiot? This isn't worth my time. You're just a waste of time. Izuku felt something snap, something cold. Want to tell me to take a swan dive off the building, Kaken? Or was that only before you pretended you cared about me? His voice was come. He tuned out the horrified expressions of his classmates and stared at Bakugo, whose face was covered in despair. He felt an energy surge through him, something he didn't recognize. He saw his breath condense in the air. Now Midoriya, shouted Aizawa. His scarf was whipping around in the wind. Izuku had forgotten he was there. Try to move something. Try to control it. He held out his hand, just like he'd seen his mom do, and willed the energy to push. Bakugo flew through the air, but so did a lot of the things around him. Spare gym equipment, jackets, and water bottles. Bakugo fell to the ground with a groan. Izuku's shoulders slouched and the wind stopped. Oh, he said tiredly. It was calm, but not the angry calm it had been before. It's a radius of levitation. I can't pick certain objects, I have to levitate a range of space. He collapsed to the ground with a dull thud, leaving both students and teachers, in equal measure, to stare in shock. Frankly, Aizawa didn't know what to think. Bakugo had always been a bit of an aggressive student, so the bullying didn't really shock him. It was the cruelty that he didn't understand. Also, the fact that he hadn't stopped sobbing since his match with Midoriya had ended. Shinso, I need you to ask Bakugo a question so you can calm him down. Bakugo, it's Joe's fault. You know that, right? Bakugo removed the ice from the lump on his forehead. Who the fuck is Joe, you purple-haired dash? Joe mama, he said with a cruel smile. Also, calm down. Aizawa groaned out loud. These kids were something else. But on the positive side, Bakugo was ready to talk, after Shinso's quirk had taken effect. And Aizawa wanted answers. Was it true, the things Midoriya said? I think I've bullied him ever since I got my quirk. Aizawa was a bit shocked at his candor, but he respected it. He was always so frustrating, offering help all of the damn time because he thought I wasn't strong enough. The nerd just wouldn't leave me alone. Was just high and mighty all the time. I'm pretty sure that's called being a good friend, Shinso said, glaring daggers. Midoriya doesn't have a superiority complex. If anyone does, it's you. Shinso, that's enough. You're only here to use your quirk if I ask you to. But I'm right. That doesn't matter. You shouldn't be talking. Alright, so you bullied him. Tell me how. He fought the poor kid. Midoriya tried to help the weaker students of the class, the quirkless and those with quirks that weren't helpful for fighting. And Bakugo would just attack him, call him names. And what Midoriya said on the training grounds, did you really say that? It was the last thing I ever said to him. What do you mean? Shinso said. I mean the last thing I did before he died was tell him to take a swan dive off the roof. I told him to take a swan dive off the roof, because maybe he'd get a quirk in the next life. And then he died. He died and came back with a quirk, and I feel like all of this is my fault. God, he was terrible. He was terrible, that was undeniable. He'd attacked and scarred Midoriya for years, and then saying this, Aizawa didn't know what to think. But he could imagine his guilt. Bakugo, let me ask you something. Is your name all for one? He blinked. What the fuck are you playing at? Is that your name? He snapped. No. Of course not, are you mental? Then it's not your fault. You're not the reason why that happened. Bakugo stared at his teacher, open-mouthed and in shock. Knock knock. Hey, it's me, can I come in? Speak of the devil, said Shinso as he stared at Midoriya, but his gaze was distant, as if he were thinking of something else. I'm really sorry, Kaken. I shouldn't have said dash. Shut up. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said a lot of the things I said to you, Dezuku. All I've been was a monster to you. A damn monster. And all you've tried to be is nice, it's damn infuriating. No one can be that nice, but you are. All you tried to be was my friend. And I hurt you because of it. Don't do that. What the hell are you talking about? Call me Izuku. It sounds wrong. Keep calling me Deku? Alright, this is sweet and all, and you're still way too forgiving, Midoriya, but can someone please explain what's going on? Did you actually die? Midoriya's face fell. Oh yeah. Well, it's a long story dash. Midoriya, you can tell him, Aizawa said gently. I trust him. And I know you want to tell him, I don't need an empath quirk to tell. Ah well. So basically there was this villain attack like, a little while ago dash. 6 months, you damn nerd. Did you forget how to count? Yeah. So he was fighting with All Might? He fiddled with his fingers as if they were the most interesting thing in the room. And? God, just tell me. I'm not a patient person. I can tell this is hard for you, but you're driving me insane. He killed a bunch of people. Some of my neighbors, my mom, and also... He shrugged his shoulders casually, but his eyes were wide and blank. What can I say? So that's why Aizawa-sensei is really helping you. Because no one has no idea what's going on, and how the fact you're here, with a quirk, makes no sense? Yeah, yep, that's about it. Damn it, he's crying, isn't he? I guess he thought I wouldn't notice if he were quiet enough. I feel even worse about yesterday now. Aizawa-sensei cleared his throat. So, you guys didn't hear, but tomorrow the class is going on a field trip. I want all of you to come. Midoriya, you won't be participating in the activities, but you'll still come. Aizawa-sensei? Midoriya asked. Aizawa Blanqui stared at him, so he took a shaky breath before continuing. I think I figured out something about my quirk. Alright, let's hear it. I think my levitation is tied to my emotions. I was scared when I had the nightmare, and again when the sirens were going off dash. Sirens? Oh, the alarm I mean. And obviously I was angry with Kakin, but I controlled it more there, because I'm better at controlling my anger than my fear. And that would link it with the empathic abilities too. And like I realized earlier, I don't have telekinesis. It's more like a leviational field. It's not like Uraraka's anti-gravity either. Midoriya? He turned to Shinso, wiping the tears from his face. You don't sleep much, do you? What? I mean, I do sometimes dash. I don't either. He smiled. And so did Midoriya. The bus ride was surprisingly fun, given the circumstances. Everyone kindly ignored the incident from the day before, and both Midoriya and Bakugo were equally glad. Uraraka, Kirishima, Iida, Shinso, and Kaminari huddled around Midoriya in the back of the bus. Your quirk is kinda like mine, isn't it? Oh boy, that was rough yesterday. I really hope Bakugo didn't actually tell him that. Yes. But actually no. Shinso smiled to himself. What do you mean? I mean, you both make things float, Kaminari said, and Iida seemed surprised that there was logic behind something he said. He gave up and leant against Shinso's shoulder. Well, yeah, but I don't make things weightless. I still use like a force or something, but it's not as accurate as telekinesis either. You really know a lot about quirks, don't you? Midoriya let out a small yelp. He wasn't sure when Yaoyorozu decided to sit behind him. All of his friends politely ignored his high-pitched scream. Yeah. I thought I was quirkless for a long time, so it was like a hobby? To study quirks, he explained, before moving back to the last conversation. And also, some part of my quirk is empathy. I haven't really figured out how to turn it off though. That's fascinating, Midoriya. I should have noticed from how intuitive you are, shouted Iida. Oh shit, oh fuck, he's going to think I'm such a damn fool. Oh really? What have you noticed about us? All good things, I hope, Kirishima said with one of his pointy smiles. Oh yeah. Well, you and Kaminari are pretty transparent with your emotions. And Uraraka's a little more nervous than she lets on. Shinso's a lot like Aizawa-sensei, anyway. Pretty sarcastic on the outside and really caring on the inside. And Yaoyorozu, you're pretty analytical of a person. You're emotional, but you're good at focusing on what you want. And what about me? Iida said. No, this isn't good. Oh no. You've got super intense emotions, Iida. I wasn't expecting it exactly, but it's kind of cool to know. Midoriya said, talking like he didn't know what he should be saying. The bus lurched to a stop, saving Midoriya from elaborating. As a class, they walked into the building. It was an arena with different zones. Water, fire, a cityscape, a forest, and more. Aizawa motioned for Midoriya to follow him. I want you to stay close today. I don't want dash. Midoriya froze. Aizawa felt a chill run up his spine. What is it? That's 13? They're so cool. Aizawa let out an audible sigh of relief. The kid was going to give him a heart attack someday. Hello, heroes, 13 said with their metallic voice. Welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ. Huh, like Universal Studios Japan, said Kaminari, nudging Shinso in the shoulder. Be quiet and pay attention. It's important to be engaged in every lessons. Iida chided. You're kind of funny when you're not a fucking idiot, aren't you, Kaminari? Midoriya tried not to smile too wide. Today, we'll be doing rescue training? All for one. Midoriya gasped. Wait to kill all my... He clasped a hand to his temple. I hope this job is worth it. I know working with the League is a risk, but... He fell to his knees. And I move the pawns, one by one, until it's checkmate for the heroes. Midoriya, what's wrong? It could have been Aizawa. It could have been Uraraka, Shinso, Kirishima. His migraine pulsed too hard to tell. Someone's here, someone's here. Purple clouds materialized from nowhere, and then, it all went to hell. It could have been 10 villains. 24 maybe. But it didn't matter how many were there. The only thing Izuku was aware of was the foreboding sense of dread that crawled up his skin like a viper. Students, stay back. I'll take care of them, Mr. Aizawa said, voice calm amidst the storm. There's no way I can do this, but I have to try. They're trying to hurt my students, and I'd rather die than watch one of them get hurt. Before Midoriya could react, the purple smoke expanded and swirled. All he could see was the angry shades of black and violet, and all he could think of was the undeniable sense of vertigo. When he opened his eyes, he saw Shinso, Minetta, and Tsuyu. And he started to feel the all-too-familiar sensation of losing control. Shinso, he said as he started to feel the currents of his quirk start to stir. He saw Tsuyu's hair blowing in the wind. Midoriya? Make me calm down. In an instant, Shinso's quirk took hold, and suddenly Midoriya could think again. He'd forgotten what that felt like. They were standing on a boat in the shipwreck zone, surrounded by villains that weren't attacking. They were just standing a safe distance away, standing in the water. I have a plan, he said. I have a plan of how to get out of here so we can get out of here and help Mr. Aizawa. Why should we listen to you? Minetta said. He had a fair point. Midoriya wasn't even in their class. Do you have a plan, Minetta? Asked Tsuyu with her signature blunt honesty. There was a moment where no one said anything. Shinso stared at Midoriya. His friend had gone from calm to angry in an instant as glared at Minetta. The air was icy. Minetta. He looked at Midoriya, alarmed. You know I have an empath quirk. Don't think that kind of thing about your classmate. What are you talking about? I don't like you. Shinso considered Midoriya his friend, but honestly he was kind of afraid of him at the moment. I don't like you, Midoriya repeated, continuing, but you're important to the plan. You're going to throw your balls into the water. The villains obviously don't know what our quirks are, so they'll be afraid of them. Tsuyu, you're going to grab Minetta and Shinso while I cause a distraction. What will you be doing? He turned to her with an absolutely terrifying smile. Well, I'll do what I do best. Lose my absolute goddamn mind. Midoriya's plan worked. As he let the fear take over, his quirk swirled the water into a whirlpool and the villains got stuck together due to Minetta's quirk. They regrouped outside of the shipwreck zone, where Midoriya was shaking from emotion. Are you okay? He practically jumped out of his skin when he heard Yaoyorozu. Why, I'm just scared, he mumbled. He'd been holding back his emotions so much that he could barely function now. He looked to his side, where Aizawa was fighting 5 villains at once. A man with hands all over his body stood next to a hulking, bird-like monster, simply watching the fight. We're trying to get to Aizawa-sensei, Shinso said. We could use some help. Yaoyorozu, Midoriya said, voice still shaking, you should use your strength. He needs pure force to get through those villains. Her face paled, but she nodded. He knows? He knows about my quirk. This is bad. This is really, really bad. Midoriya froze. Icy, cold hands, grabbing his leg. Nails scraping down his arms and back. An unholy sensation that felt like spiders crawling along the inside of his veins. Shinso watched in horror as Midoriya fell to the ground, twitching. Midoriya! Yaoyorozu shouted. Get back! Get back! He shouted between gasps. We can help you dash. No. Something's wrong with my quirk, something's wrong with me. I don't want you to get hurt. Go help Mr. Aizawa, he needs it more than I do, he yelled. Reluctantly, Tsuyu, Yaoyorozu, and Shinso left to help their teacher. Minetta gladly left and hid behind a pile of rubble. Midoriya gasped. It felt like hundreds of invisible hands were grasping and clawing at his skin. He just wanted it to stop. Just stop. He'd do anything to make it stop. He sunk to the ground, unconscious. The warp villain's smoke took him to the man with the hands. Aizawa looked on in horror as he saw the limp body of his student. Oh, don't worry, he's not dead yet, the man with the hands said, voice laced with manic glee. But that can be easily remedied. Who are you? Why are you here? Yaoyorozu demanded as she punched a villain across the room. Shigaraki. And we wanted to kill All Might, but he didn't show up. So we'll make an example with one of his students. Nomu, let's pick up the pawn. The Nomu's hand was as wide as the length between Midoriya's shoulders. He picked him up by the back of his shirt. Midoriya's head hung down, like a doll. Then his head jerked up. His eyes opened, and they were solid dark purple. The same color as the Nomu's skin. He smiled, but it wasn't one of Izuku's smiles, it was someone else's, unnaturally carved onto his face. Purple tears leaked down his face like trails of paint, and when he spoke, it was two voices, Midoriya's and a man's voice that no one recognized. Oh, Shigaraki, you killed both of us once, now it's your turn. Midoriya was talking. He was talking, but there were two voices, and one wasn't his. And the words were not his words. Someone or something was controlling him, and he couldn't break free. He was vaguely aware of the horrified expressions of Mr. Aizawa and his classmates. Bakugo seemed frozen in place. Oh, Shigaraki, you killed both of us once, now it's your turn. Who was that? Who was saying that? Now I'm sure everyone's a little confused. That would include Izuku. But really, it's not that complicated when you think about it. He wanted to scream, to cry. He wanted to do anything that was his own choice, but he felt like a marionette, and someone else was controlling his strings. Whoever this poor kid is, both voices said, gesturing to his own body, he has a connection with death. I don't have time for this, whined Shigaraki, scratching the base of his neck. Shigaraki, we must proceed with caution. Yeah, listen to Kurogyri, Shigaraki. You betrayed me in the worst way possible, and now, I've found a way to get revenge, Izuku said with an unnervingly wide smile. He was still crying purple tears. Nomu, punch him to bits, Shigaraki said with a smile that split his chapped lips. No, shouted Aizawa, but he was pinned down by the Nomu's other hand. The Nomu threw Izuku to the ground and raised its fist. Izuku started laughing. And the Nomu slammed down his fist. Midoriya, shouted Uraraka, and she started running. Shinso held her back, and Yaoyorozu stood still in shocked silence. The Nomu picked up his fist, and there he was, totally unscathed. He turned to Shigaraki with a crooked grin. Does this shock absorption look familiar to you? Said the two-toned voice. That's not possible, Shigaraki stuttered. He looked legitimately unnerved. Midoriya stood up and dusted himself off. It shouldn't be, but it is. And now, I can finally get revenge. Midoriya, Aizawa said. He tried not to flinch when he saw the solid purple eyes. It looked like he was crying purple metal. Whatever quirk this is, we can stop it. Midoriya started to cackle. Oh man, this goes so far beyond quirks. You have no idea what this kid is capable of. I'm not talking to Midoriya, he realized, thinking aloud. So who are you? Why don't you ask Shigaraki? He knows better than anyone. You're just some kid. I've never met you. Midoriya looked at his hands. Well, I am borrowing the kid's body. But you have met me. Whoever you are, leave Midoriya out of this, please. Good to know that the kid has people who care about him. He's going to need it. But no, I can't let the kid go just yet, I'm not done. You see, Shigaraki came to me a couple of years back, when I was just a petty thief. I was struggling with money, and he offered me a place with the League of Villains. His cheeks were almost entirely covered with purple now. And like an idiot, I accepted. It started off normal enough. Endurance testing, training, a little bit of field work. And that was before the lab. His fists clenched. The doctors experimented on me and tortured me for months. The temperature dropped. They took my body, what used to be a human, and they turned it into that. He pointed at the Nomu, with its blank eyes and exposed brain. He turned to Shigaraki. You had no right to do that, to torture me. To rip me apart, day by day, inject me with poisons and turn me into a monster. I may not have been a good person, but I was still human. The air began to swirl around angrily. The fluorescent lights began to flicker. You hurt me so much that my soul left my body, and now you're parading my mutilated corpse around like a fucking pet. He held out his hands. His fingers twitched in short, unnatural movements like a broken robot, and Shigaraki was thrown from side to side with an invisible force. He clenched both fists, then flicked all of his fingers outwards, and Shigaraki collided with the Nomu with the sound of crushed bones. The doors to the USJ were thrown open as Iida reappeared with the pro-heroes. Kaminari grabbed Shinso and Uraraka and ran towards the fight. Midoriya collapsed to his knees, and the purple began to leak from his mouth. He blinked, and his eyes were back to normal. "Hey man, are you okay?" asked Kaminari. His voice sounded more concerned than disturbed. Uraraka and Shinso, however, seemed unable to speak. "And no," he said shakily. Normal, clear tears washed the purple from his cheeks. "I don't know what happened. He was in my head and I couldn't do anything. I was trapped inside my own head and I couldn't do anything. Kaminari hugged Midoriya. He initially flinched at the contact, but took a deep breath and began to relax. And with that relaxation, Midoriya began to sob. When Midoriya woke up, he was in a hospital bed. Aizawa, Shinso, and Bakugo sat by the side of his bed. He blinked a couple of times, but it was still blurry. "They put you on pain meds, you'll be alright," Shinso said. "And no one else was hospitalized from the incident?" Midoriya sighed in relief. "That's good to hear." A sharp pain cut through his head like a hypodermic needle. He winced. "Midoriya, what do you remember from the USJ?" Aizawa asked cautiously, as if one wrong word would cause him to spontaneously combust. "I know a lot of stuff was happening, so I'm not sure how much. I remember everything," he whispered. "I remember the whole thing." He stared at the ceiling, pretending that was more interesting. "What the hell happened?" blurted Bakugo. "What did you do?" "Don't blame this on me," he snapped, and his voice cracked with emotion. Bakugo recoiled as if he'd been slapped. "Every second of it was hell for me. Do you not understand that? Would you like someone to go into your head and control your body? Would you like to be trapped, unable to move or say anything else? Or what about when it took control? It felt like hundreds of people were tearing apart my skin. Would you like that, Kaken?" "I don't think that's what he was saying, Midoriya," Aizawa said quietly. "I think we all want to know what you know. Do you have any idea what happened?" "I don't," Midoriya said, and the words tasted dry on his tongue. "What are your theories so far?" "Well, it could have been the Nomu, it had multiple quirks, and this could have been an unintentional side effect," Aizawa said, clearly not agreeing with the statement. Shinso had been quiet. Too quiet. "Shinso? Do you have any ideas about what happened?" Shinso's tired eyes met Midoriya's teary ones. "I was thinking about what you said." "Well, not you. He said that this was about more than quirks, and that you had a connection with death." "And what does that mean?" Midoriya asked quietly, as if he didn't actually want to know. "You're not going to like my theory," he stated. "Shinso, just tell him what you think already," growled Bakugo. "Midoriya, I think you were possessed." When Midoriya asked everyone to meet him at lunch, there was no question, the entirety of Class 1A would be there. Todoroki was even willing to miss his soba to get some answers. Yaoyorozu, however, due to the nature of her quirk, could not skip out on the food, so she brought an industrial-sized container of cheese puffs. Midoriya was sitting in the front of the classroom, where Mr. Aizawa tended to lecture. Well, when he wasn't cocooned in his yellow sleeping bag. Kirishima hadn't noticed how small and frail Midoriya was until now, and he felt a swell of pity in noticing the bandages around his arms. It was quiet, except for the soft crunch 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 from Yaoyorozu and Jiro, who were sitting next to each other and sharing snacks. So I haven't told you everything, Midoriya started. His voice was shaky, and Kirishima tried to give him a reassuring smile, but his eyes were locked onto the red sneakers he always wore. But I really don't want to keep stuff from you guys. I trust you. Midoriya, Shinso said. His expression was blank. Midoriya was right. He was a lot like Aizawa. Don't say anything if you're not ready. Kirishima noticed Bakugo had almost completely turned away from his former friend. Minetta seemed very strange and nervous, even. And Yaoyorozu was still casually eating, which was nice? Kirishima decided it was, because Midoriya didn't need more people to be so tense. I owe it to you guys after what happened at Post-USJ. Kirishima tried not to remember what Midoriya had looked like then. It wasn't right. And it wasn't Midoriya, either. So you guys know, what do you guys know? Aizawa-sensei is trying to understand your quirk? It was Todoroki, much to everyone's surprise. He rarely talked. And seriously, Kirishima had tried to be friends with him, but he guessed he just wasn't all that social. And his quirk doesn't work on you. And you can sense other people's emotions. And levitate. And then at the USJ, well, I don't really know what happened there. I'm assuming you're going to tell us? His voice was flat and emotionless. Yeah. That and more. Midoriya took a deep breath. He mustered the courage to look at his classmates. I didn't have a quirk until recently. It started 6 months ago, when a villain attacked my apartment complex. Who was it? Interrupted Ishido, unable to hold back her curiosity. Midoriya's voice was painfully soft. His name is All for One. Yaoyorozu's face paled. He burnt down the building and the people in it. That's probably how my mom. It's probably how she died. He was staring at the floor again, but Kirishima still saw the tears make dark spots on his sneakers. So what? Who cares about your sob story? Minetta said, and everyone was too angry to react. We want to know what's wrong with you, you're such a freak. What the hell happened at the USJ? Iida karate chopped him in the head, and Kirishima couldn't believe Iida would actually hit someone. He was pretty sure that went against at least, 10 rules. In fact, everyone seemed surprised at Iida's behavior. Everyone, that is, except for Midoriya. All for one, he has this quirk that breaks bones, so he touched my chest and all my bones, all of them, broke. It started with the ribs and then it spread. That's why you don't like being touched, murmured Kaminari. Why yeah, that's why. Forgive me if I'm being insensitive, Iida began. His voice was still professional as always. Just as his mind isn't. But how did you survive such an ordeal? Midoriya smiled mirthlessly. You see, that's the crazy part. Minetta wasn't really wrong when he called me a freak dash. Deku, don't you dare say dash. Midoriya held up his hand, shaking his head gently. Bakugo stopped talking. I died that day. I don't know how, I don't know why, but a couple of weeks ago, I woke up. He stumbled on the last words, as if he didn't understand them. Aizawa's been helping me ever since, trying to figure out what's going on, and at the USJ? Kirishima sucked in his breath. He wasn't sure he wanted to hear what came next. We, don't really know what happened. But, it felt like something took control of my mind dash. Like Shinso's quirk? Kaminari asked. Shinso shut his eyes tight, and Kirishima, with a pain in his chest, realized that he was trying not to cry. No, not at all. Shinso's quirk is gentle and peaceful, like falling asleep. Shinso whipped his head up, startled. But whatever this was, it was horrible. It felt like something was clawing me apart from the inside out. So you have no idea what happened? Said Uraraka casually. She was clearly having trouble processing what he was saying. We have a theory, he trailed off. He shut his eyes and took another breath. We think I was possessed? It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Crazy stuff happened all of the time with quirks. Well, look at Yaoyorozu, for example. She can just make stuff. But this was different. If Midoriya really had been possessed, This was something that really couldn't be fully explained. And that was scary. Why should you get to go to our school? We're trying to be heroes, not monsters. Minetta, why the hell are you even here? Shouted Bakugo. And for once, no one moved to stop him. Why the fuck are you at this school? I want to be a hero like you. Bakugo growled and leaned way too close to Minetta's face, baring his teeth. And he smiled and it was so far from kind. And why do you want to be one? To get all the hot girls? Seriously, once I'm a hero, they won't be able to stay away. You disgust me, you half-pint purple little mother dash. Stop, just stop, Midoriya said through tears. Bakugo picked up Minetta, placed him in the hall, walked back into the classroom, and locked the door with surprising speed and even more shocking, zero violence. Midoriya blinked hard, as if he could physically remove the confusion of that moment. Thanks Kaken? Shut up, Deku. No one spoke, and no one looked at each other. And what was there to say, really? Midoriya. All eyes turned to Tokoyami. And no one said anything. All right, bird brain, what's on your mind? We don't have all day, growled Bakugo. Kirishima wondered if he ever spoke in a calm way. I too have a quirk connected to the darkness. I believe I understand what your power truly is. All eyes drifted back to Midoriya. It was like the class was magnetized to whoever was the center of attention. And what do you think that is? His eyes were still teary, but the shakiness was gone from his voice. I think you don't have a quirk at all. I think you're a medium or a psychic, maybe. You're connected to the dead in a way others aren't. Your empathy, I think it's a result of the fact that you can sense spirits. Your levitation is very similar to what's widely believed to occur in haunted houses, not to mention the temperature drops and electrical interference. And, of course, the ability to channel spirits through your own body. Before anyone could let that sink in, Kaminari began to laugh. And it wasn't a small chuckle, no, it was teary-eyed, hysterical cackling. Kaminari, Shinso whispered angrily. Kami, what the fuck dash? Midoriya's really short. Midoriya blinked. Thanks Kaminari? He only started laughing more. Do you want to join Balls for Brains in the hallway, Short Circuit? Shouted Bakugo. Bro, if Midoriya was ever on the run, bro. Kirishima couldn't stop the smile on his face as he stared at his ridiculous friend. Kaminari. Man, have you lost your mind? He'd be, he started before laughing again. What? He'd be what? Screamed Bakugo. Kirishima wondered how he still had vocal cords. He'd be a small medium at large. And everyone erupted into laughter. But seriously bro, Kaminari said, I don't really care where your power comes from. I care that you're alright, because you're my friend and I care about you. Midoriya looked shocked. Midoriya, Shinso said with a sly grin, you're going to have to deal with a lot of shitty jokes? And now, I have a true friend who understands the feeling of the dark dash. Calm the fuck down, edgelord. Go listen to metal or whatever the fuck. Ugly's bird brain. Midoriya, Yaoyorozu said. Can I talk to you in private? Yeah. All right, everyone clear the fuck out. Oh hey, Kirishima, that's you too. Jiro, don't think I don't see you with those cheese puffs. And Hagakure, I can't tell if you're even in there, but if you are snooping I will blast you. Once everyone was finally gone, Yaoyorozu could finally talk to Midoriya. She looked down at his worried face. Down? Kaminari was right, he was pretty short. I guess there was at least one brain cell in that head of his after all. Don't worry, this isn't actually about you, she started off. His shoulders relaxed and he sighed. It's about me and my quirk. Midoriya's eyes widened. Oh yeah, All Might told me. Oh thank God. Now it was her turn to sigh with relief. I thought I wasn't being careful enough, being too obvious dash. No, don't worry about it. Also, I think All Might made a really good choice. She couldn't stop the smile. Her eyes were shining with pride. Really? He shrugged. I mean, I can get a really good sense of a person from my quirk, or whatever is anyway. Well, my point is, you're smart and strong and caring, but you're also rational. I think that's the nicest compliment anyone's ever given me, she said, beaming. I hope we'll get to be really good friends someday, Midoriya. He smiled too, but it was tinged with sadness. Me too. Minetta kicked a soda can down the alleyway. Stupid school. Stupid freak. Stupid teachers. If they didn't want him, they didn't deserve him. He couldn't believe Bakugo of all people, had talked to Mr. Aizawa. And then those girls, well, he didn't remember their names, but if he saw their bodies he'd know who it was. They told Aizawa about him spying on them in the locker room. He didn't understand why Aizawa was so disturbed. Wouldn't everyone look if given the chance? Well, fuck him. Fuck you. Fuck that freak that ruined everything. What's the matter, sweetie? He started to drool. Was that a girl's voice? Why, there's this freak at my school and he got me expelled. He should have been the one thrown out. The girl walked out of the alleyway. The first thing Minetta noticed was the skirt. It was short, really short. Then he looked at her face. Rosy red cheeks, sultry yellow eyes, blonde hair pulled up into 2 buns and messy bangs. She giggled. Oh, that's too bad. What school? He hesitated. Oh, that's too bad. I had trouble in school too, you know, she said shrilly. Oh, really, he said, but he wasn't listening. He was too busy staring at her chest. And you know what I did to the people that made me sad? He shook his head. I made them pay. Her voice was suddenly very dark, and Minetta liked the sound of it. All right, students, a lot of stuff happened, and we're going to handle it like adults, Mr. Aizawa said. He was bandaged more than Midoriya, and had more in common with a mummy than a teacher. Kaminari groaned. And what specifically do you mean by that, sir? Asked Iida, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. We're going to ignore it? That's what I do with all of my problems. Kaminari cheered. Aizawa opened his mouth in a motion to say something back, but shook his head instead. Kaminari wasn't worth any more brain power. He didn't have enough coffee for this. The UA Sports Festival is coming up this week. I expect all of you to participate, and I expect one of you to win. But sir, we're down 1 student since you expelled Minetta, Yaoyorozu pointed out, frustratingly logical as usual. I've enrolled Midoriya instead. He's a Hero Corps student now. Oh man, I hope I'm making the right choice. What? Are you deaf, you damn nerd? Wow, what's this feeling? I'm actually proud of you. I hate emotions. Well, now I might be, he replied dryly. Hey, I don't need your sass, do you dash? Alright, calm down, Bakugo. He was just surprised, okay? Kirishima said, but he couldn't stop grinning. Aizawa-sensei, are you sure this is a good idea? I mean, I don't even have a quirk, and we don't really know what's going on with me dash. Quit being so damn insecure. You've got nothing to worry about. Kirishima wiped a tear from his cheek. What the supportive friend. So manly. We're going to work on strengthening your quirks this week, Aizawa said, ignoring all of his students. He had something in common with Kaminari when it came to ignoring problems. The door to the classroom was thrown open with a slam. Well, would you look at that? It's Class 1B, Aizawa said with all of the enthusiasm of a cinderblock. Ah, Class 1A. What a coincidence to see you here, said a boy with blonde hair. It's not a coincidence, this is our classroom and you walked here, Aizawa stated. A girl with orange hair stood next to him. Hi, Kendo here. I'm here to apologize on behalf of Monoma. He's a bit of an idiot sometimes. Move on, extras, you're not going to win. Bakugo. That is not a good way to talk to our fellow students. Iida shouted, with his signature choppy hand movements. Fuck yeah, we're going to beat you guys. We're in Class 1A for a reason, and it's not because we're going to lose. We're going to fucking destroy this competition. Oh, we'll see who's going to be the real extras. Just you wait, Monoma said. The name's Monoma, right? Shinso asked. Shinso, Aizawa warned. Yeah, and who are? Close the door and go back to class. Monoma slammed the door. Shinso, you shouldn't use your quirk like that, Aizawa said. Oh my god, I'm so proud of him, it's taking literally all of my willpower not to smile at this kid. He's just like I was when I went here. Midoriya? Huh. You zone out a lot. He yawned, rubbing under his eyes. What did I miss this time? I asked you if you were paying attention, Aizawa said bluntly. Well, Midoriya said with a bashful smile, I guess you have your answer. Oh damn. Wow, I can't believe he said that. He's so cute. Was so manly. If I fail in the festival, refuse to use my left side. For lunch? I could use a cheeseburger. Much homework. I don't know how I'll finish. Mr. Aizawa, can I ask you something? Midoriya said. His eyes were closed as he tried to ignore the heading pulsing inside his head. Well, maybe if you don't interrupt me when I'm talking, Aizawa replied coolly. Oh I couldn't actually hear you. Sometimes my queer abilities are kind of overwhelming, he explained, trying to ignore the worried looks of his classmates. That's the kind of thing that comes with control and practice, Aizawa said. Oh shit, I messed up. I just thought the poor kid wasn't paying attention, not that he was struggling. The door slammed open. Did someone say sports festival? Says Nomuri as she walked in. She was in her hero costume, a far cry from what Midoriya usually saw her look like. Fuck, I wish I were wearing sweatpants right now. And sleeping. Are you Rivalry? Shouted Present Mike. Well, if Midoriya wasn't deaf from sitting next to Bakugo, that should do the trick. Iida shook his head disapprovingly. If one more person fucking interrupts this fucking class, I'm going to shove that door so damn far up their ass. Everyone was a bundle of nerves as they sat in the waiting room before the first challenge. This wasn't just a sports festival, it was a job interview, and it could make or break a new hero's career if they were noticed enough. Kirishima and Uraraka did their best to hype everyone up, but it was clear that anxiety was the dominant emotion in the room. And no one knew that better than Midoriya. Everyone's emotions were loud today. Midoriya. He flinched, then smiled sheepishly. Sorry Todoroki, you surprised me. Midoriya, if you fight me today, you'd better not hold back. I don't want your fear of your own power to make me look like a fool. I have so much more at stake today than you can possibly know. Hey man, cool it? Kirishima said before Midoriya had the chance to respond. Midoriya didn't think Todoroki was declaring war, he actually seemed kind of desperate. He felt the familiar pang of sympathy, but he had no idea why. The bell rang and it was time for the first battle. After the first two challenges, it was time for the individual matches. And first up, Midoriya versus Monoma. On his way to the arena, an intense surge of fury hit Midoriya's senses like a freight train. Out of sheer fear, he stood, frozen in the hallway. A tall, hulking figure walked towards him, almost like a giant, compared to Midoriya's small stature. Get out of the way, kid, I've got places to be. The voice was deep and low, and Midoriya actually recognized it. And suddenly he wished he hadn't. Sorry endeavor sir, he blustered. He couldn't comprehend the negative waves of energy coming off of the number 2 hero. And he couldn't stop thinking of Todoroki, trying to connect the dots. You're up next, huh? He asked. His eyes held a cold air of superiority. Midoriya only managed to nod. If you fight Shudo, you'd better give him a hard time. He's been foolish lately, and I need him to snap out of it. How dare he disobey me? I created him, I trained him, I designed him to have more power, and still he chooses to be a fool. Truly a disappointment. Any father would be ashamed to have a son as weak as my Shudo. Something in Midoriya's mind snapped, something cold and deathly calm. Just like it had when he fought Bakugo. And after weeks of sensing others' emotions, he recognized exactly what it was: wrath. Endeavor's eyebrow raised, confused at the dramatic shift in Midoriya's tone. I hope you know that your son is nothing like you. I don't know him very well, but I know that he's trying to be a hero. I know that he's a good person. And Endeavor, he said with a laugh as a maniacal grin crawled across his face, I know there's not one bit of goodness in you. Midoriya walked away before the panic overtook the wrath. When he made his way over to the arena, he was covered in a cold sweat, regretting what he'd just said. Monoma was smiling, and it was a victorious smile, even though they'd not even begun to fight. Midnight raised her whip. Read I, shouted Present Mike, next to a very tired-looking Aizawa. Midnight cracked the whip. Begna. Midoriya was not prepared. It's not that he didn't know Monoma was motivated, there was the chance of advancing to the hero course if he won, but there was no delay between Mick's announcement and Monoma's first attack. Frankly, Midoriya didn't know how he'd gotten there so fast. Surprised to see me? He drawled from behind Midoriya's ear, like the evil, alternate universe version of Aoyama. Midoriya said in response. It wasn't exactly dignifying. Monoma grinned, and it was honestly terrifying. And between that and the entire encounter with Endeavor, Midoriya's anxiety was off of the charts. But that's the thing, strong emotions only strengthen Midoriya's quirk. The temperature dropped. So that's your quirk? You think you can win by making me cold? First year Izuku Midoriya, quirk Sixth Sense, present Mike announced. With this quirk he basically has the powers of a ghost. Pretty spooky, eh? The wind began to swirl around Monoma. But he was still smiling. He grabbed Midoriya on the arm. Oh, I've won now, Midoriya. Class 1 BS 1 and only Nito Monoma, quirk copy. He can copy his opponent's quirk and use it for a limited amount of time. As soon as Monoma's fingers came in contact with Midoriya's arm, his panic increased tenfold. All he could see or think of was All for One. And that was literally. Because somehow, he and Monoma were back in time, watching the villain attack that had resulted in his death. The sky was dark gray plumes of smoke, and burnt rubber tinged the air. All for One's fist was covered in blood and guts. All Might's, Midoriya remembered as the bile rose up his throat. Monoma, he whispered, because he knew he'd never be able to talk. Do you see this too? He blinked, brushing the bangs from his face. His eccentricity was gone. Yeah, I do. Is this your quirk? Midoriya swallowed the lump in his throat. He watched his older self, his alive, normal self, as he hid behind a pile of rubble. Monoma's eyes were fixed on All for One. I don't think so, he admitted quietly. My quirk has a specific kind of energy, and I don't feel it right now. I feel something though, Monoma admitted. It's like cold smoke under my skin. That's what my quirk feels like, Midoriya explained. But looking around, looking at the memory he'd tried so hard to forget, he came to unsettling realization. Monoma, does your quirk ever make mistakes when copying? Is the quirk always exactly the same? Sometimes it's like a mutation of the original quirk, he said, but his gaze was far off. He'd noticed the old Midoriya as he ran towards All for One. Is that you? Midoriya couldn't keep the panic out of his voice. His chest felt like a corset pulled too tight. Yeah. Is this real? It's a memory. I think I know what's happening. Please enlighten me. Part of my quirk is empathy, Midoriya said, eyes wide. They were starting to water, but he'd forgotten how to blink. Touch is a trigger for me. I think when you touched me, you took me back to the source of my fear. So we're watching my memory. All for One placed a hand on old Midoriya's chest. Midoriya sank to the floor next to Monoma, turning his back to the carnage and shutting his eyes. Monoma seemed frozen in place. Monoma, you need to calm your emotions. It's how you stop my quirk. Shutting his eyes couldn't block the memory of what happened. I'm trying, Monoma said earnestly, but it's difficult. The air was filled with the mingled sound of Midoriya's screams and the unholy crunching of snapping bones. Midoriya, this isn't real, is it? Monoma said in a daze. It can't be a real memory. Midoriya couldn't respond. I need to get you out of here, Monoma realized suddenly, snapping awake. And the sky was blue again. They were standing in the arena again, and Midoriya was standing opposite Monoma. His hand was still on his arm. Their eyes met for a second, and a shockwave erupted from their point of contact, flinging them apart. Midoriya groaned. He'd hit his head in the fall. He stood up groggily, looking for Monoma, who was lying face down in the grass. Monoma is out of bounds. Midoriya advances to the next round. Midnight cheered, but Midoriya felt anything but cheerful. WD? The match is over in just a matter of seconds? Let's give it up for Midoriya Quade. As the crowd began to cheer, Midoriya hurried over to Monoma. He sat up and stared at Midoriya. Well, he said, that wasn't very much fun now. Was it? Midoriya smiled grimly and shook his head. Let's never do that again, Midoriya said. Amen to that, Monoma said. And don't worry, Midoriya. He blinked. What? I won't talk about this with anyone but you. And possibly my therapist, he said wryly, before a twisted grin overtook his expression. I know it's a touchy subject. Midoriya was not okay. He'd spent an hour after his victory, huddled in the corner of the waiting room with his eyes shut. It wasn't until Uraraka came in that he realized how long he'd been there. Hey Deku, Are you sleeping? She asked with a light laugh. He's having a panic attack. What do I do? What do I do? God, I wish I were Shinso or Yamamoto. They'd probably know what to do, but I don't. No, I had a rough match. I'm just trying to relax before the one with Todoroki, he said. He felt betrayed by the frailty in his voice. Do you want to talk about it? Oh God, I hope I'm not pushing him. But I don't want him to feel alone either. No, not really. A partial lie. I mean, nothing really crazy happened. A shameless lie. And I'm really feeling all right now, you know? Utter denial. I don't know, Deku, Uraraka said with a small but grim smile. I think the lights would disagree. The locker room lights were flickering faster than Morse code. Midoriya calmed his breathing, and the blinking slowed along with him. He met Uraraka with teary eyes. I just finished my match. Do you want to walk with me back to the stadium? You had your match already? Did you beat Kaken? Midoriya said as he stood up. I know. But I gave it my best shot, she said. They were walking down the hallway now, and something seemed more hollow about Uraraka's tone of voice than Midoriya liked. I let them down. I let them down because I'm such a failure and I'm so damn weak. I'm so damn weak and the whole world knows it. Uraraka, I hope you know that you're a really good person. And a great friend. And you're also one of the strongest people I know. The words seemed to shock her and she stood still in the hall. And while Midoriya was saying them to cheer Uraraka up, that didn't mean they weren't genuine. Sorry, he mumbled, continuing to walk. I can't control my empathy yet either. Don't worry about it, Uraraka said. They were almost at the stadium seats when Midoriya froze by the 1B waiting room. Is it okay if we check on Monoma? Midoriya said. Yeah, of course. Okay, what happened in that match if Midoriya's worried about Monoma too? What is it that you aren't telling me? I just assumed Monoma had said something hurtful, but it's clear something worse happened. Hey, Monoma, you in there? Midoriya said, gently knocking the door. Almost immediately, the door was thrown open. Monoma stared at them with wild blue eyes. Hello, Midoriya, come to gloat? He said with his usual stuck-up tone of voice. His calm tone of voice. The same tone of voice that directly contradicted the crazed look in his eyes. Well, that's not it at all. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Uraraka looked between the two of them and the different layers of awkwardness. Was it Midoriya's power? I try not to think of it all that much, but it is pretty spooky when you think about it. Well, it's not your fault copies aren't always perfect, Monoma said, this time with a genuine smile. I'm alright really. But let's never explore your traumas again. Uraraka blinked in disbelief. Okay, what? What the hell did he just say? Yeah, trust me, I don't want to either. And Midoriya, good luck against Todoroki. I know you're probably worried about how intimidating he is, but just talk to him, get to know him a little better, maybe if you're feeling up to it, you could flirt with him. Midoriya raised an eyebrow, wondering just how badly he'd lost his mind, as Monoma leaned over to whisper in his ear. And that's how you're going to break the ice. Midoriya did not have enough time to recover. Well, first there was Endeavor. That was not a fun time. Next was the match with Monoma. Fucked up for multiple reasons, not mention his horrible taste in puns. But no, Midoriya was not ready. He was not ready to face, except for Yaoyorozu, the most talented person in their class. On the plus side, he didn't have any family at home to be disappointed when he failed. Scratch that, that wasn't really good either. And with the crack of Nomuri's whip, the match began. Instantly, he had to dodge an attack of icy spears. Midoriya allowed his power to flow, and combined with Todoroki's ice, it was like a small snowstorm encompassed them. The snow stung his eyes, but Todoroki seemed unfazed. Monoma had said it as a joke, but maybe, just maybe, he had to win this match by talking with him. Maybe, he thought, as another attack almost stabbed his left arm, emotions were the only way around this. I refuse to let that monster get even this slimmest bit of satisfaction. So, Todoroki, Midoriya said, casually leaning against an ice spire, your dad's a dick, isn't he? Todoroki hesitated, looking quite a bit shocked. Perfect. It gave Midoriya the chance to throw him and all of the ice in front of him away. Just on the edge of the court, he created a wall of ice to prevent him from being thrown out of bounds. You don't know anything about my old man, he growled. You have no right to talk to me about that man when you don't know the half of the hell he put me through. Well, you call him your old man and not dad, and I'm sorry, but if that doesn't scream I have daddy issues, then what does? Midoriya was functioning purely on adrenaline now. Well, underneath that snarky facade, he was anxious beyond belief. Shut up, he growled, throwing another wave of ice at Midoriya. But he wasn't as careful, he wasn't precise, and Midoriya wasn't prepared to be so reckless. An icicle grazed his cheek, staining the blue-white arena with dark red drops of blood. I will not be like him. I will not embrace my left side and be like him. I refuse. Ouch, he said casually, blinking some snow away from his eyes. You know, Todoroki, I like learning about quirks. Oh yep. Internally, Midoriya was in full-on panic mode. But he'd gotten this far, it wasn't time to back down now. Todoroki sent a wave of ice. You see, even if your quirk is similar to a parent's dash. He jumped on the wave, skiing towards Midoriya. No two quirks are the same. Your fire dash. Todoroki was close, and he was preparing to strike. Is not the same as his. Todoroki grabbed Midoriya by the collar of his gym uniform. His frozen hand was poised to meet Midoriya's jaw. Why the hell are you saying this? He screamed with the volume of Bakugo, but his words were saturated with heartbreak. He let go of Midoriya, shoving him away. What are you trying to do? It's your quirk. Midoriya shouted. It's your quirk, not his, so don't hate yourself for something that's not your fault. The last thing Midoriya remembered before he blacked out from exhaustion was a single flame, dancing on the surface of Todoroki's left palm. Midoriya was unconscious for the rest of the sports festival. When he did wake up, Aizawa, Present Mike, and Nomuri were all sitting in Recovery Girl's room. It was becoming a pretty common occurrence. Nomuri, to no one's surprise, was wearing a hoodie and sweatpants again. Midoriya, you're awake, Aizawa stated emotionlessly. Oh thank God, I swear this kid gives me one heart attack after another. What time is it? Midoriya asked groggily. It's time for us to have a talk, little listener, Present Mike said with a friendly smile. Come to think of it, all three of them were being so nice to Midoriya. That could only mean something terrible had happened. Is everything all right? Aizawa nodded curtly. You've been staying at UA for a long time, began Nomuri, but you don't really have a place to call your home. Are you putting me into the foster system? That's one option, Aizawa began, but we have a different offer. The three of us share a small flat in the city, and if you want, we could be your legal guardians. I know that this is a lot, kid, said Nomuri, so take all of the time you need to think. You'd really be willing to do that for me? Midoriya said. Aizawa couldn't help but notice just how young he seemed, too young to be concerned whether or not he was worth it. Of course. Midoriya still looked unsure. Midoriya, you know how Shoyuta calls you problem child? Mike said. Midoriya nodded. Well, you haven't noticed him nicknaming the other students, have you? Your teacher has a soft spot for you, kid. Please say you'll do this, little listener. If you go to the foster system, Nomuri began, but she trailed off. We need to know that you have a place to come back to, a happy, safe place. Yeah, I'd like that. The teachers looked a bit shocked. I mean, if it's not too much trouble dash. Of course not, Nomuri said with a smile. Midoriya smiled too. Midoriya. Well, no one could make an entrance quite like Iida. He was panting, and there were curls of smoke rising from his calves. He stopped, stood straight, and adopted his signature military posture. Midoriya, you're going to miss the awards ceremony, he said authoritatively, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. And as your class rep dash. Oh man, he's awake. The little bastard just loves to drive me absolutely fucking insane. Does he not realize I'm concerned? And I thought Kaminari was dense. Oh, sorry, Iida. I just had a rough couple of matches. I was thinking of just resting a little more dash. Iida's eyes narrowed. He'd only just noticed Mike, Nomuri, and Aizawa. Oh fuck, I interrupted something important. Oh boy, oh god, oh no. Iida? What is it, Midoriya? You're kind of freaking out? He blinked, looking offended. Oh fuck, am I that transparent? Damn it, I thought I was good at hiding. It's not that you look like that, it's just dash. Your empathy quirk? Ha, I knew it wasn't my fault. So don't worry, Iida. Have fun at the awards. Iida smiled. He's like a brother, just a younger brother. Bakugo won, but he's not very happy about it. Serves the douchebag right, really? I can't wait to see him lose his fucking marbles. It's going to be fantastic. And I, for one, cannot wait. Midoriya couldn't help but grin. Aizawa's apartment really wasn't that small. But it was a bit messy, and according to a grumbling Aizawa, it was all Nomuri's fault. There were beer bottles and takeout thrown all over the kitchen. There wasn't that much in terms of decorations, just a collection of band posters, courtesy of Present Mike. But his favorite part of the apartment, by far, wasn't that he got his own room or the stock of junk food in the pantry. It was Aizawa's cat. Looking back on it, Aizawa was obviously a cat person, but for some reason, Midoriya had never connected the dots. But here he was, staring at the fat, one-eyed black cat with wide eyes. "Oh my God," he said, "he's so cute." And immediately he ran and hugged the cat. The cat started purring. "Huh, that's strange. Shadow usually hates strangers," Aizawa said with a sly smile. He watched as Midoriya pet Shadow's head. Yes, he thought Midoriya would settle in just fine. When Iida didn't show up 15 minutes early to class, Midoriya was a little worried. He, on the other hand, had been there an hour early, due to the fact that Mike, Aizawa, and Nomuri only shared one car. Shinso walked up to him, brow furrowed. "What the hell are you doing here so early? Is everything okay?" "Yeah. I'm living with the teacher now, so they had to drop me off a little early." "Wow, I don't know if that would be amazing or horrible," he said with a small grin. "Aizawa's my favorite pro, and now my best friend is essentially his son." Funny the curveballs life throws at you. "Did you hear about Iida's brother?" he continued in a more serious tone. Midoriya shook his head, but he was already feeling unsettled. The hero killer hurt his brother. So if he acts strange today, that's why. Before Midoriya could respond, they were cut off by the topic of their conversation. "Midoriya, Shinso, get to class," Iida shouted before zooming away. Midoriya couldn't ignore the nagging feeling of dread building up in his chest. "Internships?" Ashido shouted. "Yes." "Now hurry off to lunch," Aizawa said in his monotone voice. "Not you too." Midoriya and Yaoyorozu stopped. "All Might said he wants to talk to you. Both of you." Aizawa's tone was clipped, but Midoriya wasn't surprised. He knew that Aizawa disapproved of All Might's recklessness. And as far as personality-wise, Aizawa was like the overprotective mother, Present Mike was the cool uncle, and Nomuri was the wine aunt. But either way, it wasn't out of character for him to be a little cool towards All Might. Midoriya and Yaoyorozu shared a knowing glance. They walked down the hallway at a brisk pace. "This has to be about one for all, right?" Yaoyorozu asked with a hushed tone. "I hope so. I was worried this was about all for one." He opened the door to the conference room, and All Might was sitting in his civilian form on a couch. He smiled when he saw them, but there was always this small look of pity in his eyes whenever he saw Midoriya. It made him a little uncomfortable. "Both of you, due to knowing about One for All, will be interning with one of the heroes that trained me." Midoriya and Yaoyorozu grinned at each other. "His name is Gran Torino. Midoriya, he may be able to help you gain control with your quirk. Hell, few quirks are more unpredictable than One for All. You'll be taking the train tomorrow, if you're both okay with this." Midoriya nodded. "Yes, sir." Yaoyorozu shouted. Oh my god, I cannot wait. I'm going to be training with All Might's teacher. This is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me." Midoriya was worried that he wouldn't be able to check on Iida before they left. The internships were all over, after all. Uraraka had to leave even earlier to make it to Gunhead's agency. But as he walked with a fangirling Yaoyorozu, he saw Iida standing among the crowd. He shouted with a smile. He and Yaoyorozu ran towards him. And Iida stood there, just a few steps away, and the world was somehow quiet, despite the dissonant whirring as the trains passed. Iida smiled, put on a brave face like he always does. He gave a curt wave. And Midoriya, for the first time, was prepared. He was prepared for the full force of Iida's emotions to smack him like a battering ram. But it didn't. Midoriya stared in disturbed awe as Iida walked away, swallowed by the crowd of busy passengers. Because Midoriya didn't feel a single emotion. When he looked into Iida's eyes, all he felt was empty. When Midoriya found out he was going to be training with All Might's teacher, the first word that came to mind certainly wasn't ketchup. But here he was. And as he looked at Yaoyorozu, she seemed equally shocked. What on earth is going on? Has this man grown senile in his old age? Gran Torino jumped from his unconvincing pool of fake blood. Ah, gotcha. His voice was gruff and grumpy. His beady eyes looked disappointed when neither Midoriya nor Yaoyorozu reacted in the slightest. He leant his head to the side with a twisted grin. Well, I guess I'm talking to someone who's actually died. Not too convincing, huh kid? Yaoyorozu's eyes flickered with offense. Well, he certainly has little regard for others' feelings. I hope Midoriya's not too uncomfortable. Huh, not really. Midoriya responded, awkwardly. Gran Torino looked at Yaoyorozu strangely. Huh, Toshi, no wonder you picked her. Reminded you of someone, doesn't she? You're the next holder. Yes, sir, Yaoyorozu said as respectfully as possible for someone who had half her height and far less of her wit. Yaoyorozu was very tall, and even just standing next to Midoriya, she looked years older. How many bones have you broken? Neither of them realized how Midoriya's skin paled. Oh, just a finger during the entrance exam. That was reckless, Gran Torino with a mischievous twinkle in his eyes. Jiro was trapped, she blurted. She cleared her throat, regaining her composure. One of my classmates was trapped and I was concerned for her well-being. But one for all, as long as it's continuously flowing through my body, is actually pretty easy to control. Gran Torino laughed. Do you have any idea how bad Toshi was when he first got the quirk? He couldn't go a week without a broken arm. You're doing good, kid. What % are you up to? Yaoyorozu tried not to smile too wide. A compliment. A compliment from All Might's teacher. I can't believe it, I'm so damn happy I could scream. Probably around 10. It was closer to 15 during the USJ attack, but it was a little painful. Gran Torino nodded. Midoriya shuffled his feet nervously, feeling out of place. Broccoli boy. Midoriya snapped to attention. Believe it or not, this was not the first time he'd been called that. Yes, sir? We're going to summon a spirit today. You up for that? God no. Are you sure that's a good idea? Squeaked Midoriya as respectfully as possible when reining back unadulterated terror. Yeah. We've got to train your quirk, all of it. The man showed no signs of budging. The light in Gran Torino's kitchen sparked out from too much electricity. Midoriya mumbled something quietly that sounded like, I'll pay for it. What exactly is your plan? Yaoyorozu asked, starkly calm next to Midoriya, who was almost hyperventilating. I'm with Midoriya on this. I'm not sure either of us want whatever happened at the USJ to ever happen again. Gran Torino chuckled. Well, it's simple. We're going to contact All Might's predecessor, Nana Shimura. A few cups of tea and too many pastries later, Gran Torino was ready. He brought out a Ouija board and blew off the thick layer of dust. Yaoyorozu raised a brow skeptically, and Midoriya looked a bit like Kaminari when he takes a test. So what we're going to do is put our hands on the wood thingy dash. Planchette dash. Planchette. Thank you, Yaoyorozu. Glad to know that All Might passed his power to someone with more brain cells than he has. Yaoyorozu didn't respond. I want to be happy with that compliment, but I also don't like that he's insulting All Might. But also, not going to lie, I kind of love that he thinks I'm so much smarter. And we're going to think about the name Nana Shimura. And we're going to see if Midoriya goes all exorcist or whatever. He said it so casually for something that, in Yaoyorozu's opinion, was a much higher concern. And Midoriya looked, well, he looked like he was about to faint, frankly. Yaoyorozu had a bad feeling about this. They placed their hands on the planchette, and it began to move. It was slow. Midoriya wondering if it was just Gran Torino fucking with him. He wouldn't be surprised. Please tell me, are there any spirits here today? Gran Torino asked. The planchette drifted lazily to yes. Is there a spirit called Nana Shimura? The temperature dropped drastically. Yaoyorozu and Midoriya made panicked eye contact. They could see Gran Torino's smile in the flashing lights. The planchette drifted over words quickly. Hiwikaran. Midoriya shut his eyes and gasped, and then his shoulders relaxed. In fact, he was more relaxed than he'd been since the start of the internship. Yaoyorozu shifted away uneasily. When Midoriya's eyes opened again, they were solid sky blue. Long time no see, Gran. A woman's voice spoke with Midoriya's. For once, Gran Torino seemed at a loss. Is Midoriya okay? Yaoyorozu asked. Midoriya's face smiled. It was a kind smile, but the expression wasn't one he'd usually make. Yes. He's resting now. I asked him if I could talk to you. Nana? Is that really you? Their smile shifted a little, becoming a little more bitter. Yes, Gran. How's Toshi? Is he holding up all right? Well, yes, Gran Torino said at a loss. They cursed something under their breath. All for one got to him, didn't he? What a bastard. Midoriya turned to Yaoyorozu with a knowing smile. She tried not to look at the solid blue eyes, but it was hard to ignore them. They just looked so wrong on his face. You're Toshi's successor, aren't you? Yaoyorozu nodded. You're going to be great, sweetheart. I believe in you. Gran Torino fiddled with the planchette, looking around at things like someone making fun of Sherlock Holmes. Yaoyorozu was too at a loss to say anything about it. Suddenly he froze. Kid, look at Midoriya through this, he said with a hushed voice. With shaky hands, she took the planchette and looked through the warped glass. And she didn't see Midoriya, she saw a muscular woman with black hair, not unlike hers. She had a graceful, strong face, and was wearing a hero costume. With a start, she realized she was looking at someone who was dead. Nana, what can you tell us about the boy's quirk? Nana frowned. Yaoyorozu's heart rate rose. It's not a quirk, first of all. Yaoyorozu still cringed at the two voices speaking together. Because he died, his spirit behaves like a dead one, except because he's alive, he has ties to the living world. That's why he can sense live people's spirits, just like the dead can. Gran nodded, pretending to understand. But really he was more confused than ever. That gives him a weakness, though, they said bitterly. He can't stop a spirit from possessing him if they want to. There's no way. Yaoyorozu whispered. No, they said with a sad smile. And when spirits use a quirk through him, it takes a toll. The spirits essentially have to change his body to accommodate the quirk, and then revert it back to normal before they leave his body. That's why he was in so much pain when the Nomu possessed him. Yaoyorozu nodded, still staring through the glass of the planchette, trying to imagine she was taking notes and not talking to the dead hero possessing her friend. I'm going to leave now, but Gran, you gotta let this kid rest. He's going to be exhausted. And Midoriya collapsed to the floor. When Midoriya woke up, Yaoyorozu was sitting in a chair at his bedside, scrolling through her phone. She was wearing earbuds, and he could hear the punk rock blasting too loud. He thought she was more of a pop girl, but then he realized Jiro probably gave her a playlist. Hi, he said softly. Yaoyorozu jumped out of her chair. Oh, Midoriya. Thank God it's just one voice. Are you feeling all right? Does anything feel different? Not really, just exhausted, he said slowly. He'd been in pain after the Nomu had possessed him, but now, all he felt was drained. Well, actually, something's different. He noticed Yaoyorozu's shoulders tense. What is it? I'm really craving cotton candy. Okay? I hate cotton candy, he said with a grin. I wonder if she liked it? Maybe, she said, returning the smile. Oh, thank God, I was worried. Did you, do any training? Yeah, I was trying to ramp up one for all to 15%. Wow, it feels nice to talk to a friend about this. Even if his abilities are seriously creepy. I feel bad to be so uneasy. Midoriya's so nice. But spirits, possession, all of that stuff, I can't handle it. My powers scare me too, Midoriya said quietly. They really do. Yaoyorozu stopped. I wish I could help him, but I don't know what to say to make him feel better. Did you see Hagikure's Instagram post? She said, taking a different approach, distraction. She and Ojiro are dating now. I think they're cute together. Midoriya smiled, looking at the picture of Ojiro wrapping an arm around an empty space surrounded by a floral dress. Well, I guess she found someone that sees her for who she really is. Yaoyorozu grinned, in spite of herself. Midoriya, that was a bad joke? He laughed, and she was glad to hear his laugh again. Hey, it's not my fault. You try spending time with Monoma. A patrol? In Hosu? The suggestion had seemed to come from nowhere. Yaoyorozu raised an eyebrow. Well, you are interning with me for experience, are you not? He grumbled. Kids these days. I swear they just get dumber by the year. Yes, sir. That sounds like a great idea, Yaoyorozu said. Midoriya smiled. Sometimes she reminded him of Iida, except without the intense inner commentary. He wondered how Iida was doing. Maybe they'd run into each other in their patrols. It had been all over the news. The hero Ingenium had been paralyzed from the waist down. Midoriya couldn't even begin to imagine the effect that had on Iida. He'd never had any siblings, but he wouldn't be able to handle it if anyone in Class 1A was injured like that. Midoriya woke up with a start. He'd been dozing on the train, but the screeching metal worked better than any alarm clock would have. Not to mention all the people screaming. Screams of terror tended to wake you up from a light nap. If that weren't shocking enough, when he opened his eyes, the first thing that he saw was a puce-colored, winged Nomu standing right in front of him. It would have been 8 feet tall if it hadn't been so hunched over its emaciated body. Midoriya felt the familiar sensation of its spirit clawing at his skin, but he was scared. He couldn't move, he couldn't escape. It stared him right in the eyes and screamed. It was high-pitched and shrill. It was so close that Midoriya could smell its rancid breath. Yaoyorozu grabbed his arm and pulled him away. She picked him up and jumped out of the hole on the moving train. They tumbled to the ground, but thanks to a lot of bubble wrap from Yaoyorozu's quirk, they survived. Yaoyorozu, are you okay? He asked with a confidence that he didn't possess. Possess? He hated that word now. Yeah, she said shakily. I wasn't prepared. Yaoyorozu, I was asleep. You're doing better than I was. She smiled weakly at his sad attempt at levity. Iida, has anyone seen him? A man shouted, a few yards from them. He was wearing a light blue costume with a fin on his helmet. Midoriya felt nauseous. That was the hero he was supposed to be interning with. And if he wasn't there, he was dead. Or injured. Or doing something incredibly stupid. Something like chasing down the hero killer. Before he could react, a Nomu with an extra set of arms jumped in front of Iida's mentor. Yaoyorozu, you need to hold it off. I'm going to find Iida. Midoriya shouted, and his voice sounded shrill. And he hated it. He hated that he sounded like a child when he was trying to be brave. Yaoyorozu frowned, but nodded. I hope you know what you're doing. Be safe, Midoriya. Midoriya wasted no time running through the streets, looking for empty alleyways. That's where Stain usually attacked. And he had to be sure Iida wasn't the next victim. He couldn't let that happen. He kept running alley to alley, without a sign of Iida. His stamina was beginning to wear thin. It felt like someone had shoved a cheese grater down his lungs. But he couldn't let that stop him. His pain wasn't worth Iida's life. He turned a corner, and that's when he saw it. A tall, dark silhouette of knives and ribbons against the moonlight. The glint of a knife. The chrome armor covered in a blanket of blood. Iida! Midoriya shouted. Logically, it was foolish, but he had to stop Stain somehow. And the gears in his head were spinning far too fast to think of a real plan. Plus, he was long past thinking of his own well-being. Another child, another mask too heavy for the shoulders of a boy. Have you come to play the hero as well? Stain's spirit wasn't like anyone else's Midoriya had ever sensed. It was a dark, swirling, incomprehensible wave of rage and loneliness, but it was confused, and it was damaged. Midoriya, leave. This doesn't involve you. Iida screamed deliriously. Let me have this, let me rip him to shreds. I want to be there when the light leaves his eyes, and I want to be the cause of that. The breath hitched in Midoriya's throat. This wasn't Iida. Not anymore. Iida, if you really think like that, you're never going to be a hero. Stain grinned, and his mouth was so thin and wide that it looked like a zipper. Finally, someone who's worthy of the title hero, he said, and his voice was as slithery as a viper. The icy talons of a spirit tore at Midoriya's skin. He knew what this meant now. And he knew that he couldn't fight against it. He had nowhere to escape it. And there was a chance, a small chance, that this was the only way he could save Iida. It was different than at the USJ. The pain was more concentrated, focused on the space between his shoulder blades rather than his entire body. And he'd stopped fighting against it. He knew that was pointless. But there was something else, something that wasn't right. Because something about this spirit was familiar. Like he'd met it before. "I'm sorry, Iida," he managed before he lost consciousness. He crumpled to the ground. "Midoriya, your friend might have had a heroic heart," Stain mused, walking over to Midoriya's unconscious body, "but he was weak. And that is almost worse. So sorry, child, may your death bring on a better world." Stain raised his sword, poised to kill. He slammed down the knife with a clang. But Midoriya wasn't there. He was floating, suspended in midair, in front of Iida. He was still unconscious, but muscles in his back kept twisting and moving. Iida realized with horror that something was moving under his skin. There was a horrible tearing sound, as something sliced open his back from the inside. When Iida mustered the courage to open his eyes, he didn't really believe what was happening. Midoriya's eyes snapped open. They were fire engine red. The same red as the bat-like wings that had sprouted from his back. They were covered in splatters of darker red, of blood. He smiled and tilted his head. It made Iida's skin crawl. "Hello, Stain." It was such a sinister tone of voice, but it was calm, so calm. It wasn't like during the USJ, when the spirit possessing Midoriya had been emotional. This spirit was past the point of emotions. It was another boy's voice. It seemed like he'd been about Midoriya's age. Stain, for the first time, seemed truly at a loss. "Step aside, child. You're stopping me from my civic duty." Midoriya chuckled. It echoed off of the brick walls of the alley. The red was spilling out of his eyes and over his face. "Civic duty? You're about to murder a child. Think about that for a second, Stain. Just think about it." Before Stain could react, Midoriya flew forward and kicked him in the chest, chuckling with that haunting grin all of the way. "Midoriya," called out Iida. His eyes were wide and glassy. His muscles were beginning to twitch, Stain's paralysis was wearing off, but he wasn't ready to move just yet. "You're not talking to Midoriya," the voices said, as if Iida had just told a joke, "but my name is Tsubasa." Todoroki didn't want to be here. First of all, he was seriously doubting his decision to intern with his father. He'd done it because he thought it was the best opportunity for him to become a better hero. And a real hero would ignore the bad to become better. A real hero would learn how to deal with villains. And Endeavor, without a doubt, was a villain. And besides, it's not like he wasn't doing anything valuable. Right now, they were patrolling the streets of Hosu, the last place where the hero killer Stain had killed. It was also where Ingenium had been paralyzed. And that meant one thing. The stakes were high, and through Endeavor, Todoroki had the chance to actually be a hero. To save a life, or at least, prevent another death. There had been reports of the creatures from the USJ attacking the city. It hadn't really registered with Todoroki until they came across a demolished city block, bright with smoke and fire. Their screams echoed in the cool night air. "Shudo, stand back and watch a pro at work. Guide civilians away but don't get involved in the fighting." He nodded curtly in response. Endeavor's soulless eyes flickered with something akin to light. "And Shudo, be safe." Oh man, Todoroki wanted to rip his two-toned hair right out of his head. This man was trying to care? It was pathetic, and it took all of Todoroki's willpower not to scream. He simply nodded again and began helping civilians. And that's when he noticed something strange. A blur of blood and metal in a back alley. The bell-like cling of metal against metal. Shouting voices. He ran over without a second thought. It could have been the hero killer, it could have been something as simple as a mugging. But Todoroki knew someone was in danger, and his legs moved before his mind had the chance to think. One of Stain's blades scraped the surface of Iida's armor, shedding small sparks from the friction. Midoriya was fighting Stain from above while Iida attacked from below. His wings were large, stretching out as far as the length of his arms. Iida tried not to think about how he'd grown them in a matter of minutes. Stain kicked Iida away and grabbed Midoriya by the throat. "You going to kill me?" he said with a grin. "You can't, because I'm already dead." "Well, I guess you could kill Deku, but I dunno, I feel like the nerd needs a break, you know?" "Shut up, you brat. You want to die twice?" The voices chuckled mirthlessly. "Oh, to be a child murdered by adults twice. Huh, Katsuki did always say I had bad luck," he said bitterly. "Hey, Four Eyes." Iida, who'd been paralyzed again, was lying face down on the ground. He looked at Midoriya with a haunted expression. His light armor was covered in red and brown splatters of blood, and his dark sleeves hid just how much blood he lost. "I may have been a bit of a douche to this nerd when I knew him, but do him a favor and be nice to him? None of this bonkers shit is his fault," he said, and all Iida could think of is how the words sounded wrong in Midoriya's mouth. He still couldn't wrap his head around the fact that someone else was talking to him. But still he nodded. Stain's grip grew tighter, but Midoriya didn't react. "The dead can't feel pain, you know," Midoriya taunted. The street lamp on the edge of the alley sparked out from too much electricity, and they were plunged into darkness. There was a quick succession of metallic clangs as Midoriya threw Stain around the trash cans, where he belonged, with his levitation. But Stain was smart, and he adapted quickly. Within a matter of seconds, he's pinned Midoriya against the brick wall of the alley, holding back his neck and wings back with a long katana. "Now, child, stay still. This will only take a second." Midoriya blinked his solid red eyes, and some more tears trickled down his face. "Sorry, Deku, I did the best I could." A wall of flames lit up the dark alley. Stain jumped away, and Midoriya grinned like a Cheshire cat. Iida stared at Midoriya, who was standing in front of the flames, smile flashing bright in the orange light. His costume was bloody, and his bat wings and red eyes stood out next to his teal hair. Whoa, if I weren't so disturbed, he'd look like a fucking badass. "Thanks, Fireboy, I guess," said Midoriya casually. "Midoriya?" Todoroki said. "No, but I knew him when we were kids," he said. His face was smiling, but his crying eyes were wide and distant. "Let's stop this child murder, eh? I'll at least get revenge on one." Todoroki seemed shockingly unfazed about the whole situation. "Just try not to kill him, all right?" Todoroki said. He looked down at Iida, who was still on the ground, struggling to move. "I don't care if this is your fault. You're going to help us with Stain, you got it?" Todoroki shot a wave of ice at Stain. "Whoa, ice too? That's sweet." Midoriya sent a leviational shockwave towards the hero killer, throwing him at the wall with a crunch. Iida got to his feet or charged a kick towards Stain's head, knocking him out. "Well," Midoriya's voices said cheerfully, "that was easy. We need to tie him up with something, keep him locked up dash. Hey, Cold Shoulder. You might want to catch me soon, Four Eyes' arm is kind of fucked right now. Also, be nice to Deku when he comes back, God, he needs it." He leaned over to Todoroki's ear and whispered mischievously. "He's kind of sensitive. Catch you why?" Todoroki said cautiously, watching the chili pepper-colored tears race down his face. "The Nomu, the creature they turned me into, it's dying." Midoriya smiled wistfully. "And that's a good thing?" Iida blurted. Midoriya turned to him. "Imagine you had a piece of paper with all of your problems written down on it, and someone just threw it into the fire. It's freeing." Midoriya's eyes fluttered closed, and he collapsed into Todoroki's arms. The red spilled from his eyes, ears, and mouth, and it was hard to tell what was and wasn't blood. His wings started to twitch and shrink, shriveling up like dry paper. "Midoriya, Midoriya. Wake up," Iida shouted. He blinked slowly, and they were both glad to see the whites of his eyes and his green irises. "Midoriya, how are you feeling?" Todoroki asked, because he had no idea what to say. "Ow," he answered with a wry smile. "That's not a real answer," shouted Iida, karate chopping with only one hand. "Oh, thank God, you scared me. You're a frustrating little shit sometimes, you know that?" "Yeah," Midoriya said with a frail smile, "I am." "You're not making sense, did you hit your head?" said Iida. "You asked a question. With your emotions, I mean, sort of." Midoriya winced. Tsubasa's wings were only as long as his shoulders now. His face was pale from the blood loss. So you knew him, Todoroki said flatly. That must have been very hard for you. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Yeah, he and Kaken used to be friends with me when we were kids. I remember when we went to middle school and Tsubasa stopped talking to Kaken when they went to different schools. Oh, and Kaken was so mad, but now I'm wondering how long it was before Tsubasa became that thing. Todoroki didn't dwell on that thought, because, well, he didn't want to. It was disturbing. Midoriya's eyes started sagging. No, stay awake. Stay awake, Midoriya. Stay awake. Well, that didn't happen. But on the bright side, he didn't have to hear Stain's haunting soliloquy. And I just feel like it's all my fault, you know? I've got a lot of power and I let him fight by himself. Midoriya opened one eye groggily. Yaoyorozu was sobbing opposite Aizawa, whose face was neutral as normal. He gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Hey guys, I'm alive, he said. We'll try to say it. Instead, a sound between a strangled voice crack and a raspy cough came out of his mouth. Midoriya. Yes, it's me, fam. God, it was so funny. All he wanted to do was laugh. He looked at the confused expression on Yaoyorozu's face. Why was this funny again? Well, he didn't know, but it really was. Midoriya, you're on a lot of pain meds right now, explained Aizawa gravely. Ah, so that's why the room is floating, he said. He tried to say it with a straight face, but burst out laughing all the same. Yaoyorozu's face seemed to pale a little more. Midoriya, you had some pretty serious injuries. Can you tell me what happened? Honestly, I hope he doesn't remember. Maybe it'd be easier on the poor kid. He's been through so much, through too much, he doesn't deserve this. Oh yeah. So basically, I was sleeping on the train. Yeah, and I woke up because one of the Nomu just came and whoosh, screech, kapow dash. He cut himself off, imitating the Nomu with hand gestures and sound effects, like a little boy playing with action figures. Midoriya. And then Yaoyorozu saved us with bubble wrap. And then I was like, where's Iida, where's that absolute mad lad? He continued with slurry enthusiasm. Abruptly, he began to imitate the movie trailer guide voice. And what has he done? Will the heroes reach him in time? Or will the killer get to him first? Keep listening to find out. Is this just the pain meds or did that last spirit really fuck him up? This isn't the Midoriya I know. Oh, it's not the spirit, Aizawa-sensei. Everything's just lighter with the medicine. Aizawa froze. Midoriya had never directly responded to his emotions before and it was a little weird. Oh, scratch that. It was downright unsettling. And then he had the audacity to laugh and smile, and it was such a pure expression, but something about it felt so twisted. But anyway, I found Iida and then Tsubasa possessed me and then Todoroki showed up. What a talented guy. What a cool guy. Midoriya, what do you remember about this Tsubasa? Aizawa asked cautiously. Yaoyorozu looked just about like she might pass out. No, he mumbled. He shook his head close to his chest like a little kid. I need to talk to Kaken. Midoriya, when that spirit possessed you, you sprouted wings. Yeah, I know, pretty rad. But they're gone now. Aizawa's face was unreadable, and his emotions were like tangled jewelry. Midoriya couldn't make sense of them. Not exactly. They've shrunk down a lot, definitely too small to fly with, but the doctors don't want to remove them because they're connected to your spinal cord. Can you let me know that you understand? For the first time since he'd woken up, the giddiness was gone. Yeah. I've just got 2 more scars to worry about, he said neutrally. He let his head fall to the pillow before tiredly mumbling, I need to talk to Kaken. And he fell asleep. At first, Bakugo was happy. He was happy that Genist wouldn't have to lecture him today, or wouldn't lay a finger on his hair, that he didn't have to think about the fact that he had underlying anger issues that could make being a hero difficult. But Midoriya was in the hospital, and he couldn't help but feel that tightness in his chest as he boarded the train. He remembered the last time he'd been this concerned. And that time, Midoriya hadn't survived. Bakugo gave a speech at his funeral. He'd done it because aside from Inko Midoriya, no one really knew Izuku. The only other person in the entire world, aside from his deceased mother that knew Izuku well enough to give a eulogy was Bakugo. His bully. He wasn't able to finish his speech. His voice had stopped working partway through, and he was just so angry. What gave that nerd the right to die? How could Midoriya die on him? It wasn't fair, the selfish brat. He'd gone and died before Bakugo had the chance to fucking apologize to him. He'd gone and died, and Bakugo had never done anything nice for him. Bakugo tried to catch his breath, but it was hard. There were too many people in the train station, too many people, make it stop. He dug his nails into his palms, all too aware of the semicircles they were making. It was really cold in the train station, that god-awful cold, clammy feeling, but his throat felt too warm. He always forgot, was this what it felt like to throw up? He gripped the sink, not remembering how or when he got to the bathroom. But he was glad. It was empty. No one would have to see this. He tried the breathing exercise that his mom taught him. In for 8, out for 2. But it wasn't working. Why wasn't it working? Damn it. He was breathing fast, in and out, but it was like none of the air was reaching his lungs, it was just scratching his throat. He collapsed to the ground, wrapping his arms around his knees. He couldn't breathe, or he was breathing too much, he wasn't sure. He couldn't remember, because he couldn't think. It was too hard, with the angry pulsing of white noise stinging the surface of his brain. He clenched all of his muscles, shutting his eyes, just wanting it to stop, just wanting it to be still. It was going to be a while before he'd be able to get to the hospital. Bakugo showed up nearly an hour later than agreed. Aizawa was pacing, staring at his phone angrily. Bakugo's hands were in his pockets to hide the shaking. Where the hell were you? And why didn't you respond to my texts? Aizawa growled. Geez, sorry. I missed the train and I lost service. Bakugo grumbled in response. He didn't need Aizawa making him feel any worse than he already did. He felt the hot, angry tears start to rise. Fuck, he knew Aizawa could see it. The tears were practically overflowing, balancing on the edge of his waterline. Aizawa would see how weak he was. Bakugo, look at me. He didn't. Aizawa put his hands on Bakugo's shoulders. Bakugo, I'm sorry I snapped at you, Aizawa said, and for some reason, Bakugo believed him. After everything that's been happening, you were worried I was attacked by a villain, Bakugo realized aloud. Aizawa scoffed. Let's just go talk to Midoriya. He really wanted you to be there. Aizawa opened the door, and Bakugo was a bit shocked. At first glance, Midoriya didn't seem injured, just a little paler than normal. But from his back were 2 leathery wings. They were very small, each about twice the size of a hand, but they were bright red. He'd seen them before. Tsubasa, murmured Bakugo. He felt sick to his stomach. Aizawa tensed next to him. Who's this Tsubasa? Aizawa said. He was Bakugo's best friend in elementary school, Midoriya said. He was a lot more lucid now. The mania of the pain meds had long since faded. Deku, Bakugo started, but his mouth went dry. He licked his lips, they felt as dry and cracked as facepalms looked. Did Tsubasa die? Aizawa didn't think he'd ever heard such a gentle, timid tone from the boy. It was a little unsettling. Yeah, and according to Detective Naomosa, it may have been his grandfather that did it. He was a scientist working for the League of V-Villains. The Nomu? Bakugo's face was uncharacteristically blank. Fuck. He clenched his fists. That's fucked up? Why yeah, agreed Midoriya through his tears. The purple one that got you during the USJ said he was tortured for months. I'm going to tear each villain limb from limb for what they did to him. How old was he, How many years was he tortured? I've never hated anyone more than I do. I have 0 reservations in killing them. How many years, Deku? Do you think he even went to middle school? Had his first kiss? Tried out for a sport? Did he get into the high school he wanted? Go to the movies with his friends? He never got to fucking do anything he had the right to do because of those fucking villains. Midoriya was quiet through it all. Kaken. We're not going to let them win. Bakugo's head snapped up. Midoriya's voice, physically, was frail, but the conviction was so strong that it was powerful. Bakugo nodded. This is invaluable. Disgusting, but incredibly useful. I'm just upset we didn't find you sooner. The footage was of the inside of the UA girls' locker room. Minetta sat in his chair, letting his feet dangle below. They didn't reach the floor. Shigaraki scratched his neck again. No, really, I mean it. We're going to succeed because of you. Toga squealed happily, throwing her arms around Minetta. It was all worth it. They betrayed me. Those beautiful babes and that freak. That damn freak. Shigaraki frowned from behind his hand. What a nutcase. Still, he hadn't been lying to the perv. He had given him a way to find out Yue's whereabouts. That didn't mean he had to like him. I just can't wait for their yummy blood. Toga exclaimed. Dabi was lounging in the corner of the room, lost in thought. Dabi, quit brooding, get over here, he said with a grin. We've got a school to destroy. Aizawa, Midnight, and Present Mike were prepared. And that's saying something because one never sleeps, one never wakes up on time, and the other just has no idea what the fuck is ever going on. But they were prepared. For Midoriya's sake. Going back to school after intern season, there was always a lot of press, eager to get the scoop on future heroes or UA dropouts. Both were equally entertaining, apparently. But they knew that Midoriya couldn't deal with them. They knew. Because while the kid was brave and even reckless at times, on a normal basis, he, unfortunately, had about as much backbone as a dandelion. So Midnight and Mike walked on either side of him, with Aizawa in front, as they walked into school. Excuse me, hey, stop, I said excuse me, shouted a reporter. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, so tight in fact, that it made her eyes bulge. Hey, you stop when I'm talking to you, I've got a question. Present Mike stopped dead in his tracks. Aizawa smiled. He smiled, but it was one of those smiles that shows too many teeth. Now this is going to be good. I've only got 2 words for you, Mike began, cracking his knuckles. He took a deep breath. Nemuri gently placed her hands over Midoriya's ears. Begone, thought. The reporter was, quite literally, blown backwards by the insult. Needless to say, they got into the school without one other reporter attempting to ask a question. Midoriya rolled his shoulders back, unaccustomed to the small wings on his back. Midnight had modified his uniform so they were sticking out, which was nice of her and all, but really, he wished that they weren't there at all. Deku, shouted Uraraka. She rushed over to his desk and hugged him tight. I was so worried about you, when I heard you were attacked by Stain. That was really scary. Don't mention the wings, don't mention the wings, don't mention the... Yeah, the wings are weird, Midoriya said. He'd given up on ignoring the emotions and only responding to spoken words. But Uraraka wasn't prepared. What? It was on your mind, Midoriya explained casually. Midoriya. He snapped up his head to meet Todoroki's. Yeah, you're all right, he said, as a statement. Not as a question. Will ya? Midoriya said with a tilt of his head. Uraraka looked equally confused. That's good. Thank goodness. I thought he was going to die in that alley. He walked away and over to his seat. Midoriya took a deep breath. He could do this, he could do this. The other students greeted him similarly. It was like they were congratulating him on not dying. He could do this, he could do this. He wasn't on the verge of a mental breakdown or anything. Definitely not. He hadn't seen Iida either. He could do this. He could. Aizawa walked into class, making brief eye contact with Midoriya before beginning. Your semester won't end with your final exams. There's going to be a mandatory summer camp. Ashido and Kaminari cheered. Even Todoroki seemed remotely excited. Iida rushed into class, uncharacteristically late, but no one commented on it. But don't be fooled, it's not going to be fun and games, Aizawa continued. We're going to push your quirks to their limits. We're going to make you the most prepared class. I'm not going to lie and say we haven't been through hell, because we have. And this summer, we're going to prepare you for the worst, because I know we can get through it. Somehow, even though it was addressed to the whole class, Midoriya felt like Aizawa was talking to him directly. And that was comforting. Maybe he could do this. During lunch, Midoriya, Uraraka, Iida, Kirishima, Kaminari, and Shinso were sitting at a table, making painful small talk as they ate. It was driving Midoriya crazy. Each glance at his wings and overly saccharine conversation was like adding a degree to a pot of boiling water. And it wouldn't take much to boil over. Hell, even Shinso was acting too nice and it just wasn't him. Not to mention, Iida had barely said a word. Sure, They were only being nice to him, but still. He could do this. He could do this. Ah, mocked a familiar voice. Midoriya felt a smile tug at his lips. If it isn't Class 1A? I don't remember the wings, but the match with him was so crazy, I wouldn't be surprised if I just forgot about them. Wow, look everyone, it's Monoma. What a pleasure. Shinso said it so dryly, Midoriya couldn't help but laugh. How are you, Midoriya? Heard you were injured in your internship, Monoma said, and Midoriya didn't mind. Nothing was sugar-coated like it had been with the rest of one. Uraraka shot him a dangerous glare. I swear if he makes Midoriya uncomfortable. Oh, just taking it one day at a time. Midoriya said brightly because he could do this. Are you saying dash? Midoriya cringed in anticipation of the pun. That you're winging it? And burst out laughing. But he stopped and looked around, and the others just looked awkward. Monoma noticed, and for just a moment, like a flicker, his personality switched to concern. But in an instant, that flashy smile replaced the frown. Well then, see you losers around, Monoma said and walked away. Why are you guys acting so weird? Midoriya asked because he could do this. Iida furrowed his brow intellectually. Bitch, is you blind? No offense, but why aren't you acting weird? Kirishima asked, and Midoriya was grateful for the honesty. Why would I be acting weird? Midoriya stuttered. He could do this? Odds were, well, they were pretty low at this point. Well, I mean, Uraraka said, gesturing her hands to nowhere. Well, what? You think growing wings as your friend, dead friend, possesses your body, and controls your actions is going to make someone act weird? Midoriya said. A maniac smile was on his face. What, is that what you think? None of them said anything. If they did, it wouldn't have made much of a difference anyway. Midoriya had already boiled over. The lights were flickering and his eyes were glowing bright green. Maybe the fact that the League of Villains has been abducting and torturing children our age would make me act weird. Or maybe the fact that none of you have looked me in the eye, maybe the fact that I died, or that I have this power that I don't even know if it's a quirk or not, or that dead people can possess me and I have no control of it ever, maybe that would make me act weird. He chuckled and it was eerie. The air was cold. Maybe you think I should be acting weird because I was the one that got the second chance when more deserving people didn't. Maybe I should be because my mom died and I came back. Maybe I deserve to stay dead. Maybe dash. Midoriya, what do you think your mom would say if she heard you talking like that? Shinso said. The words were dry on his tongue. She dashed. Midoriya's eyes unfocused and his shoulders relaxed. She'd want you to breathe, Midoriya. To breathe, to calm down, and to stop blaming yourself, Shinso said. His voice was softer now. Now sleep, get some rest. Midoriya's eyes closed. When Midoriya woke up, he was in Recovery Girl's office. He realized he was there really frequently. Probably too frequently. Shinso, Kirishima, Iida, and Uraraka were sitting around him. Hey guys, sorry about earlier. The words sounded stale, and he hated it. That's all right. Anyone in your situation is surely dealing with a large amount of stress, Iida said, waving his hands around. If you bottle things up, you might end up a dumpster fire like me. No one fucking wants that. No one needs that to happen again. No one blames you for being upset, Uraraka said. I just wish you didn't hide it. Is there anything we could do to make you feel better? Kirishima asked. I don't think so, Midoriya said. There is something I want to figure out, though. I don't think you guys can help. If you tell us, maybe we can, Shinso said. There was a frustrated edge to his voice. I'd rather you ask us for help than spiral again. It's a lot better to trust others than internalize your problems. I know from experience. Well, it's about my quirk. And whether or not it's a quirk or not. I feel like knowing what this power is might help me understand it better, but I've gotten evidence both ways and it's really confusing. I was thinking that it was something like being psychic, like Tokoyami said. And that would make sense. Aizawa-sensei couldn't erase it, and the Nomu that possessed me in the USJ said that this power was so far beyond quirks. But on the other hand, Monoma was able to copy it during the sports festival. Well, I'm 100% the wrong person to ask about this, Kirishima admitted, but have you considered asking Yaoyorozu about it? That's a great idea, Kirishima. And, really, I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to yell at you guys. As far as emotional breakdowns go, you're doing better than me, Iida said with a smile. And it means a lot that you still tolerate me, even if I am a dramatic little shit. Hey Yaoyorozu, I was wondering, can I talk to you about my quirk for a minute? Midoriya asked. Yaoyorozu's head snapped up. Her eyes were underlined with dark circles that didn't match the hyper-energized look in her eyes. Amazing. Hey, are you okay? Midoriya, you're not going to believe this, she exclaimed with an excited giggle. This is groundbreaking. Worse. Okay? What is? Midoriya decided to indulge her for now, but her emotions were pretty out of character at the moment. He was a little concerned. Yaoyorozu held out her hands. There was a small white mouse in her hands. Look at it. It stared at him with beady red eyes. It was surprisingly adorable. I am the best. Did you get a pet? Midoriya said, suddenly questioning her sanity. Her emotions were a lot more extreme than he'd ever seen them, and they were fluctuating between extremes. You don't get it? Yaoyorozu said. She was grinning ear to ear. Get what? So I knew when I got one for all, it was going to enhance my own quirk? Midoriya nodded for her to go on. And I didn't know how much it would, but I never would have guessed this. She showed him the mouse again. Yaoyorozu, your quirk made that? He had an uneasy feeling at the pit of his stomach. A quirk that creates life, quite literally, was godlike. It was extremely dangerous. She was grinning. Yes. Before One for All, I was restricted to creating non-living things, but now, I'm limitless, Midoriya. Yaoyorozu, that's really amazing, but are you doing okay really? I haven't slept in 2 days, but I'm great. Nope. Internally freaking out. Have you talked to All Might about this yet? She shook her head. Oh, you said something about your quirk, what were you asking? Trust me, your quirk problems are a higher priority. Shigaraki cracked each finger. Forwards, backwards, and at each knuckle joint. He didn't like waiting. It made him angry. Glad you could make it twice. Of course, sorry I was late. Come on. I'm always on time, boss. Whatever, Shigaraki said, scratching the back of his neck irritatedly. We've got a plan to take down All Might. And this time, no one will stand in our way. When, where, how, Dabi said. He said it so blandly, it barely seemed like a question. Summer camp. We've got all of our details thanks to Minetta's. He trailed off, searching for a good word. Surveillance. Pervy invasion of privacy. Toga giggled. Hey, I'm just doing my part, Minetta said. Shigaraki narrowed his eyes. We'll get Muscular. And Moonfish. And we'll ambush the camp with another Nomu. Questions? Toga shot her hand up like she was in class. Oh me. Pick me. Yeah, Toga. How many people do I get to stab? As many as you want, Shigaraki said, scratching his neck again. Did she have to be that annoying? What will I be doing, specifically? Dabi asked. Well, actually you and Twice will be working on something together. Yay, buddies. I can't wait to work with him. He's a poor man's e-boy, there's nothing special about him. Whatever, just let me burn Hero Society to the ground. For the first time that evening, Shigaraki grinned. Someone else, finally, agreed with him. Midoriya knocked on the door. All Might, sir? Are you available? He asked the door. Yaoyorozu had her arm around Midoriya's shoulder. He was the only thing that kept her standing. It's about Yaoyorozu. Well, I think it's her quirk dash. The door was thrown open. All Might was in his skeletal form. Is she all right? I don't think so, Midoriya admitted. All Might's eyes widened in alarm. Okay, come in. Take a seat on the couch, he said, ushering them in. Can you tell me what happened? God is a woman, shouted Yaoyorozu like a drunk sorority girl. Actually, it sounded a bit like when Midoriya was on pain meds. And that woman is me. All Might's brow crinkled. He said, this doesn't seem right. She's usually so rational, and now she sounds high. One for All affected her quirk, Midoriya explained. She's not restricted to creating non-living things anymore. She's not. All Might stopped. He put a finger to his chin. He opened his mouth to say something, but closed it before he said anything. He turned around and sat on the couch with a thud. "Oh boy," he said with a dazed expression. "Yeah, it's pretty crazy dash. Oh boy. We don't know how it affects her body dash. Nope. We don't know the limits dash. Nope. Or even how it affects her mentally dash. Nope." Midoriya and All Might stared straight ahead, deep in thought. "I don't know about you guys," Yaoyorozu began slurrily, "but I feel fantastic. Yaoyorozu, I don't want you to use this part of your quirk for now. I think it's clear to say it affects your mind dash. I'm fine. Still, as your mentor, I'm responsible for your safety. So for now, please, don't use it." The first thing Midoriya did when he got home was crash on the couch and take a nap. He'd had a long day. Between his mental breakdown and Yaoyorozu's new powers, he had a lot going through his head. And the last thing he wanted to do was think. He woke up a few hours later. Shadow had fallen asleep next to him. When Midnight saw Midoriya, he was sitting on the couch, petting Shadow. "Hey kiddo, heard what happened at school. Want to talk about it?" He shook his head, scratching Shadow under his chin. Shadow started to purr. Midnight sat down next to them. "Look kid, I know that scars hurt sometimes. My wings don't hurt dash. And I know it's not always a physical pain." Midoriya stared at her with his wide eyes. She wondered what emotions he was sensing because she sure as hell couldn't tell what she was feeling. She pulled down the edge of her sweatshirt, revealing a deep scar near her collarbone. "I got this when I was just starting out as a hero. I was patrolling with another hero who only saw me as an attractive woman wearing a sexy costume. He didn't like being told no, so he gave me this," she said, tracing over the scar with a finger. "For a long time, that scar was a source of pain. I tried to cover it up and forget it was there. But after a while, I realized that a scar isn't a reminder of something traumatic that happened, it's a reminder that you survived. You survived and you're stronger because of it." "Thank you, I needed to hear that." Midnight smiled sadly. "I wish you didn't have to," she said. She ruffled his hair with a more genuine smile. "You're a good kid, you know that? All right, now that you've finished the written portion of the final, it's time for the physical exam. Good job everyone, I'm sure you did great. Todoroki and Yaoyorozu, you're up first against Mr. Aizawa. That should be a good one. Next up is Midoriya and Bakugo against All Might. Childhood friends against a childhood idol, what are the odds?" And next dash. Midoriya stopped listening after that. He was nervous, really nervous, and not about his own exam. Yaoyorozu was basically a ticking time bomb. It was only a matter of time before something went wrong. It's not that he found her irresponsible, he just knew that her curiosity might override her common sense. He knew that she was still going to experiment with this new power. He knew she would ignore All Might's advice. Yaoyorozu was intelligent and inquisitive by nature, and that wasn't always a good thing. It had taken her a couple of days to act like her normal self, and she only seemed more eager to experiment with her quirk. Midoriya stared at the screen, watching Todoroki and Yaoyorozu plan. "I think I have a plan," Todoroki said. "If you can distract Aizawa-sensei, then I can take him by surprise and restrain him." "Sound like a plan? Can you make a distraction?" Yaoyorozu smiled, and it was uncharacteristically wicked. "Oh, you bet. He'll never see it coming." Todoroki was not prepared. He'd always seen Yaoyorozu as an intelligent and rational person like himself, so when he told her to create a distraction for Aizawa, he trusted her to have a well-thought-out plan, and well, he surely didn't see this coming. Todoroki didn't shock easily. But when your teammate pulls a stunt like that, there's really no other suitable reaction, even for someone as stoic as himself. When he'd told Yaoyorozu to make a distraction, he didn't realize just how much of a distraction she was going to create. The plan was simple and quite foolproof. Eraserhead would see Todoroki and erase his quirk, because if we're being honest, it was the strongest physical quirk in the class. While Aizawa is preoccupied with fighting Todoroki and holding his quirk, Yaoyorozu would create a distraction, Aizawa would lose Todoroki's quirk in the commotion, and Todoroki would freeze him into place. It was a simple plan. Nothing had to go wrong. It started off all right, he thought. After Aizawa erased his quirk, he was able to hold his own fighting hand-to-hand with him. But Yaoyorozu was taking a long time with her distraction. Todoroki was no fool. While he was very skilled, he was not at the level of his teacher when it came to quirkless combat. He knew if Yaoyorozu didn't create her distraction soon, they'd fail the exam. He looked over to Yaoyorozu, who looked like she was struggling with her quirk. Her brow was furrowed and her face was sweaty. Without warning, something flew out of her stomach. Multiple somethings. And then, to make matters worse, those somethings started swarming around Todoroki and Aizawa. There was an angry swirl of black and yellow and neither Todoroki nor Aizawa knew how to react. It looked like bees, but that didn't make sense. Todoroki knew Yaoyorozu's quirk could only create non-living things, right? Now, Todoroki had seen Yaoyorozu create a lot of things. A grenade launcher, a cannon, a perfect iPhone. The list goes on and on. But she created them slowly, and something about what she created was chaotic. It gave him an uneasy feeling. And Todoroki, being the calm, stoic, sad boy we all know and love, reacted accordingly, shouting something akin to, Mr. Aizawa just stopped and stared with wide eyes. And though Todoroki didn't have Midoriya's empathetic abilities, the expression on his face definitely said what the actual fuck. Technically, the plan worked. Yaoyorozu's distraction did, in fact, work, and Todoroki was able to freeze Aizawa into place. But Yaoyorozu had passed out. And Aizawa and Todoroki, in equal measure, were still trying to wipe the mental image of bees flying out of her stomach from their heads. I'm going to kill you. All Might had heard that threat many times, from villains, from civilians, from 8-year-olds online that time he tried to play Fortnite. But none of those threats scared him as much as this. I swear I will. If you withhold information about a student's quirk again I said I was sorry. You won't be walking out of this building. And don't get me started on withholding this from Aizawa. Recovery Girl kissed Yaoyorozu's feverish forehead. Take it seriously when I say that if you continue to hide information about quirks, I will make sure that you'll never step foot in this school again. Well, that kinda contradicts the last thing you said Get out. Midoriya felt a little bad about it, but he was glad he and All Might weren't the only people to know about Yaoyorozu's new ability. He couldn't handle another burden. Yaoyorozu was his friend, and he would defend and keep a friend's secret no matter what. But the fact that he didn't have to worry about protecting this particular secret was a bonus. Hiding the fact that she was All Might's successor was much simpler, mostly because it wasn't as volatile. But the fact that Yaoyorozu might use her original quirk in such a dangerous way wasn't something he wanted to stay hidden. Not only could that knowledge protect Yaoyorozu, it could stop other people from being hurt. But Midoriya didn't have time to feel relieved, because he was about to fight All Might. He and Bakugo weren't on bad terms, but they were in a weird spot. He didn't know whether to call Bakugo his bully, his friend, or brother. When Bakugo started to speak, he never knew if it would be an insult or a compliment. The truth is, while Bakugo may be friendly with him now, Midoriya would never forget the years of relentless bullying. The burned scar on his arm from an accident, or, the fact that Bakugo had told him to kill himself. That wasn't high on the list of things he'd said to Midoriya. Alright, listen up you damn nerd. Instinctively, Midoriya's hands flew up to his face to block an explosion. Bakugo's eyes flashed with an expression, hurt, regret. It didn't really matter. It was gone as soon as it came. I wish my voice didn't make people flinch. I wish I was something more than my anger. What's the plan, Kaken? I know you want to run away, he said, but I don't want to. I want to prove that we can take him down. For Tsubasa. Me too, Midoriya said. For Tsubasa. Bakugo's eyebrow quirked up. What? I want to try, at least. If we're going to go against the League of Villains, we've got to prove that we can do this. Bakugo grinned, and his teeth glinted like a knife. Now that's what I'm talking about. Exactly what I wanted to hear. Let's get him. Midoriya couldn't help but smile back. I have a plan. It's a little out there, but it might work, if you're willing to listen. Let's hear it, you damn nerd. All Might, to be perfectly honest, was having a bad day. Between Yaoyorozu's reckless quirk use and the death threats from Eraser and Recovery Girl, well, he was ready for the day to be done. He knew the match against Midoriya and Bakugo would be taxing for a multitude of reasons. Namely, the fact that he'd watched Midoriya die that one time. That wasn't a fond memory. But regardless of his own emotional state, there was also the complicated dynamic between Bakugo and Midoriya. And given that the match started with Midoriya sobbing, clutching his smoking arm, he could only assume their relationship had taken a turn for the worse. Bakugo was nowhere to be seen. Young Midoriya, are you quite alright? Midoriya turned to meet All Might's concerned stare. His eyes were glowing. Kaken and I got into a fight, he said. His voice sounded small, and All Might couldn't help but wince at the use of Bakugo's nickname. As Midoriya got more upset, the debris of the cityscape began to swirl around, and the streetlights started to flicker. All right, young Midoriya. Setbacks, as distressing as they may be, happen to everyone. Even to me. So I urge you, please use this as a learning experience. You'll get stronger from this. I want you to try your best to pass this exam even without Bakugo. I know you're capable. And I don't want your potential bogged down by dash. Click. Shocked, All Might looked down to see the handcuff around his wrist. Bakugo was grinning ear to ear. All Might looked back to Midoriya, who was wiping the tears off his face. His expression was smug. The street lights stopped flashing and the wind stopped. He smiled to All Might and waved. Is he all right? All Might asked, mostly to himself. Yeah, he's great, Bakugo said with a dumbfounded grin. He's just a manipulative little shit. The plan is almost ready. Due to Minetta's surveillance, we know UA will be training with the Pussycats. Thanks, Kurogiri, Shigaraki said, scratching his neck. Isn't it kind of wrong? Twice started, going after the students when we're really angry at the adults. Let's kill all the children. Dabi raised an eyebrow before shrugging that off. Still want me to work with him? Yes, Shigaraki stressed. Of course I do. How else would we pull this off? And with the Todoroki boy be there? I don't see how that matters dash. I have a question, Minetta interjected. Shigaraki's eyes widened. He didn't like being interrupted. What do you want me to do? You're going to be our bait, Toga said, licking her lips. And they're going to fall for it? The bus ride was going to be a long one, but Midoriya was glad. It gave him the chance to relax before training with the Pussycats. Which, by the way, was something he could not wait to do. It was all he could do to hold back his inner fanboy. The only thing he was upset about was leaving home, because that meant leaving Present Mike and Midnight. And Shadow. He sat at the back of the bus, like he's always done, but this time he smiled. This time, everyone on the bus was his friend. He didn't have to avoid a bully or be alone anymore. He wasn't alone anymore. Are you ready for this? I heard the Pussycats don't hold back on their training, asked Ojiro. His head was resting on Haguker's shoulder, and it looked kind of funny, like his head was floating midair. What? Are you kidding? I'm pumped. And plus, I failed the practical exam. I've got to redeem myself, Kirishima shouted. Ashido nodded in response. Kaminari looked both ways, as if he were about to cross the street. What's up with you, Short Circuit? Bakugo said. Got a power outage? Are we just going to ignore the fact that Yaoyorozu can create life? Yaoyorozu smiled to herself. But really, guys, no one's excited about this, he continued. Midoriya didn't even react when frickin' bees flew out of her stomach. That's because I already knew about it, Midoriya explained. What? He found out. I told him to keep it a secret, Yaoyorozu said, seeming to enjoy Kaminari's flabbergasted expression. Okay, but what can you do? Can you, make a human? Kaminari asked. First of all, yes. I am a woman. Kaminari rolled his eyes, but grinned at the joke. Second, if I were to make a human with my quirk, it would be insanely draining. I basically had a mental breakdown when I made a mouse. Who wants to play a game? Uraraka shouted suddenly. Oh God, Yamamo with a mental breakdown? The world would end. I gotta lighten the mood. Depends on the nature of the game. I will only play a game that is respectful and good-natured, said Iida, chopping the air with his hands like he always does. Ooh, never have I ever, said Hagakure. Two truths and a lie, shouted Aoyama. Truth or dare, Shinso said with a grin. Because with me, you're actually going to do it right? Iida looked nervous. Oh shit, oh fuck, I just know I'm about to make a damn fool of myself. Midoriya, truth or dare? Uraraka asked. Truth. What quirk would you have if you could choose? Uraraka said. She punched Shinso in the shoulder. Tell the truth, Shinso said, activating his quirk. He looked very bored and had been assigned the lie detector of the game. Where's all the gossip? That's what I was interested in. Well, I might want something like Hagecure's, because it would be perfect for a stealth mission, or I might even want something like a creation quirk, like Yaoyorozu's, because those quirks are super versatile. Then again, a healing quirk would be nice, and telepath would be dash. Alright. We got it, Deku, shouted Bakugo. Your turn, Midoriya. Bakugo, truth or dare? Oh god damn it, which one's worse? He asked. No one responded, but Kirishima started laughing. Okay, Rocky, which one's worse? I'd pick truth, responded Kirishima, who seemed amused and threatened at the same time. Alright. I'll do dare because I'm not a coward. Midoriya smiled. Well, Kaken, I dare you to dash. We're here, Aizawa stated. And brace yourselves, this is not a picnic. Iida had decided that Aizawa had a vastly different definition of a fun training day than he did. Iida did not think, for example, that fighting earth monsters for hours in the blistering heat and missing lunch was fun. In fact, he hated it. And what's worse, is Midoriya? Yeah, Midoriya's worse. Now, Midoriya is one of Iida's best friends and all, but every once in a while, he'd look at Iida as if he were trying not to laugh. Iida isn't stupid, he knows his thoughts are a little aggressive, but still. Having an empath best friend was kind of annoying sometimes. Iida wiped the sweat from his brow. He heard a strange, rasping sound, like someone on a ventilator, and looked to his side. Shinso was bright red and wheezing. Well, at least I'm having a better day than this Kool-Aid man looking ass. Midoriya started cracking up. Like full-on tears and shit. Iida rolled his eyes, but was kind of funny when Shinso looked confused. Even if Midoriya was laughing at him, the rest of 1A wouldn't know why. All of a sudden, a 12-foot monster made of clay and had tree trunks for arms rounded the corner. Are you guys up for this? Midoriya asked. There was a sparkle in his eyes and he looked determined, but honestly Iida hated it. Because he felt as energetic as a sack of fucking potatoes. Let's do this, Shinso said in the most unenthusiastic way possible. Iida kind of felt bad for him. He was honestly quirkless when it came to situations like this. We should make a careful and well-thought plan to bring down this monster, Iida began. At this point, the rest of Class 1A had caught up to them. Fuck, Shinso, how'd you get so far ahead? Kaminari asked. Spite. Oh. I have a plan for the monster, Midoriya said. We'll need Hagakure to distract it from behind, and maybe Tokoyami, you could use Dark Shadow for that too. We need it to not know where to attack. Then, Iida, charge your legs for a kick. Uraraka will make you float, and I'll help levitate you towards its head so you can kick its head off. Deku, your plan is to yeet Iida at the monster? Bakugo said, cackling. What? No, it's a lot more complicated than that. So it's yeeting but with extra steps, Shinso said. No. The monster started growling and drawing closer. It was so large that each step shook the ground. Alright. Now or never, Hagakure said. She fist-bumped Ojiro before shouting at the creature with Tokoyami. Uraraka, now, shouted Midoriya. Iida began charging his legs, and Uraraka sent him into zero gravity. Midoriya flung Iida towards the head of the monster. Fuck you, Groot. I woulda kicked your ass but this works too, shouted Iida midair, much to the shock and amusement of Class 1A, except for Midoriya, who watched with a knowing smile. He kicked the clay head off of the monster and Tokoyami helped him get down. Kirishima walked up to Iida with tears in his eyes. He put a hand on Iida's shoulder. I just want you to know, he trailed off, sniffling. That was the most majestic thing I've ever seen. Well done, my little kittens. I especially loved that little bit of teamwork at the end, Pixie Bob said to the 20 exhausted teenagers. She was like looking at a phone screen in a dark room, painfully bright. Next to Pixie Bob was a little boy wearing a red hat with 2 horns on it. Who's that? Uraraka said cheerfully. That's Kota, my nephew. He's been staying with us, Mandalay said with a smile. If only it weren't under these circumstances. I love him, but I don't blame him for being so angry. Midoriya, against his better judgment, decided to introduce himself. "Hi, my name is Izuku Midoriya, but you can call me Deku," he said with a smile. Kota promptly punched him in the nuts. "Unacceptable. A child should never do such things." Iida shouted. "Hey, I like this kid." Midoriya rolled his eyes at Iida. A few days into the camp, and things were going well. Everyone's training was intense, but was really helpful. Midoriya really liked training with Tiger, because finally he was starting to get more control over his telekinesis. He was also really happy that Yaoyorozu was training the more dangerous aspects of her quirk with Ragdoll, since Ragdoll could keep track of her stats and make sure she was doing okay. In fact, Yaoyorozu had already moved on from making insects to making birds. It was going well, which of course couldn't last. Midoriya should have known this by now, but even with his tragic track record, he wouldn't have been able to guess what would happen next. It was a game Class 1B would hide in the woods and try to scare Class 1A, thus preventing them from getting to the end. Due to the fact that some of 1A had failed the practical portion of the exam, there was an odd number of students. So, with his luck, he was on a team by himself. "Ah, sorry man, you just got unlucky," Ojiro said, holding Hagyuker's hand. "Well, you got on a team with your girlfriend, that's pretty lucky." Midoriya responded. "Oh, we gotta go. We're up first," Hagyuker said. "See you on the other side." Midoriya sighed. He not only didn't have a partner, but he was going last. He saw Kota, drawing something in the dirt. "Why are they all so selfish?" "Hey buddy," Midoriya said, more careful to keep his distance than last time. "Whatcha drawing?" Kota scratched out the scribbles on the ground. "Nothing, leave me alone." Kota whined. He got up and started to leave. "Sorry." He nearly jumped out of his skin when he felt a hand on his shoulder. "Hey kid, it's not your fault," Mandalay said. "He's been going through a tough time lately. His parents used to be heroes, but they got killed in the line of action." "I'm very sorry for your loss," he said, and he hated the taste of those words on his tongue, like it was aspartame instead of sugar. "Look, I know it doesn't seem like it, but he appreciates you. You're one of the only ones from UA that's even acknowledged him. It means a lot to him." Midoriya nodded. A timer went off. "Oh, looks like it's your turn to get scared. Good luck, kid." Midoriya went into the woods, and instantly, the atmosphere was different. The warm glow of the campfire was gone, replaced by the eerie, misty glow from the moonlight. Midoriya heard crying. He knew it was just someone from Class 1B trying to scare him, but still, that person sounded really scared. He kept his eyes focused on the path ahead of him, and listened only to the scratch of the dirt against his red sneakers. He heard another sound, but this time it came from behind him. He whipped around and saw someone small moving in the bushes. "Monoma, if that's you, I swear to God." He trailed off. His voice was wavering. His mouth felt dry, and he couldn't ignore the queasy feeling of fear that was beginning to take hold. Suddenly, someone jumped out of the bushes, and it wasn't anyone from Class 1B. It actually took a moment for Midoriya to recognize him, because he was so covered in blood and dirt, but one glance at the purple balls on his head told Midoriya all he needed to know. "Minetta?" "Midoriya, you have to listen to me," he whimpered. "I don't have a lot of time. I am going to die." "Whoa, okay, just tell me what's happening?" Midoriya asked. "The League of Villains, Midoriya, they're here. They're going to attack the camp, and they're going to kill the students. And they're going to kill me. They were always going to kill me. If this is the only thing I can do, well, then I've served my purpose. We need to get you to Aizawa-sensei now dash. And why would you want to do that?" said a voice from the shadows. There was a sound, like a match being struck, followed by a blue flame. Dabi's face looked angular in the light, like he'd held a flashlight up to his face and was about to tell a ghost story. He tilted his head to the side and his smile was menacing enough to send a chill down Midoriya's spine. "He was working for us, you know." Midoriya looked from Dabi to Minetta. Minetta's eyes filled with tears. "I'm going to die, and I'm so young. I never had the chance to be good." "Maybe he was," Midoriya said. His voice was trembling and he hated that. "But he made a mistake. And he's trying to make up for it. Don't even try to hurt him, because I'll stop you." It happened so fast, Midoriya never even had the chance to react. Dabi shot a wave of blue flames straight at Minetta. Midoriya was a few feet from the blast, but the heat still stung. He tried to stop Dabi from attacking again, but he'd already left. Alarmed, he looked at Minetta to see if he dodged, but Minetta wasn't there. The only thing left of Minetta was a pile of gray mud. Midoriya couldn't hear anything but the rushing of the blood in his head, staring at the gray, mud-like substance that used to be Minetta. Minetta, who'd once been his enemy, had died right in front of him, begging for his life. The breath hitched in Midoriya's throat when he realized what this must have meant. Minetta must have died to save them. Midoriya would not let that death be in vain. He snapped out of his shock and ran towards the clearing. He had to warn them. "Mandalay!" shouted Midoriya. His voice was shrill. "You're supposed to go the other way," she said with a chuckle. "Did you get that scared little kitten? You don't understand. There are villains attacking the camp, and they're at the south border of the woods dash." "Wait, you're serious," she said. Her face paled, but her tone was indifferent. "They killed someone," Midoriya said, and he hated how casual his voice sounded. "I'm going to use telepath to let everyone know," Mandalay said. "Midoriya, I need you to do something for me." "What is it?" "I need you to save Kota. He trusts you the most. He has this hideout in the caverns up by the north side of the camp." Her voice shook when she said her nephew's name. Midoriya nodded. He turned to leave, but Mandalay stopped him and grabbed his arm. Midoriya dashed. "What? Be safe?" Midoriya didn't answer her. He ran through the woods with nothing in his mind, relying only on muscle memory to make his way to Kota's cavern. His body remembered what it felt like to run. His brain didn't need to do the work. He didn't want to think about the fear he'd experienced when he saw Minetta, a boy who knew with unshakable certainty that he would die, yet had been determined enough to make his last moments count. Kota was standing at the mouth of a small cavern, and looked annoyed when he saw Midoriya. "You again? Why can you just leave me alone?" Midoriya felt the icy fingers of a spirit. No, there were two spirits. Each rested a hand on his shoulder. They weren't aggressive, but now was not the time. He had to save Kota. "What are you doing here? I told you to leave me alone." Kota shouted. "I'm here to take you back. There are villains attacking the camp and Mandalay Dash." "This is all your fault," he growled. For a moment, Midoriya froze. He hadn't expected this, and in stopping he realized just how out of breath and exhausted he really was. "What do you mean by that?" Midoriya asked. He tried to swallow, but his throat was so dry. "You heroes, you put on your silly costumes and say your silly catchphrases, and all you do is get people killed." "Oh man, I like this kid." The man's chuckle echoed off of the cave walls. He was standing in the dark, and the only thing Midoriya could make out was the fact that this man was incredibly large, around 5 times his size. He needed to run away. This wouldn't be a fight he could win. The man was wearing a tattered black cloak, and peeking from behind the hood was a grotesque mechanical eye. "It's too bad, though," the man continued. He dropped his cloak, and his muscles emerged from beneath his skin and covered his arms and chest. "Because I'll have to kill you. Both of you." Kota whimpered. The man laughed. "Oh, but who am I kidding?" he said. His voice was caught somewhere between growling and mockery. "I can't wait to kill you." Midoriya wanted to panic. He could feel the fear tingling through his nerves, but he forced himself to be calm. For Kota's sake. He considered his options, though there weren't many. He could try to run away, but without a strength and stamina quirk, he knew he wouldn't get far. He was already exhausted. His only other option was to fight. The man started walking towards them. His face was plastered with a sadistic grin. Midoriya made eye contact with Kota. His eyes were wide and lined with tears. "I'm scared, I don't want to die." Midoriya knew that he wasn't strong enough to beat this guy. He remembered the spirits from earlier. He didn't know how his body would react to hosting 2 spirits at once, but he really didn't have a choice. He needed to save Kota. So he let them in. Kota had never been so afraid in his life. This man, this monster, was standing in front of him. And the only thing in between was that punk Midoriya. He was so skinny and weak, Kota knew he'd do nothing to stop the man from hurting him. He didn't have any faith in Midoriya. He was just like all the other wannabe heroes, who saw him, who pitied him. They wanted to help because they wanted to look better. They wanted to help because they weren't good enough, and helping him made them feel better about themselves. But when Midoriya turned around, he wasn't Midoriya anymore. Not really. One of his eyes was light blue, and the other was navy. It looked like someone had dumped paint over his eyes and it was dripping down his face. And his face didn't hold that timid, kind expression that it usually did. Midoriya looked wrathful. "What's wrong with you, kid?" the villain continued. Kota was comforted to notice that the villain was visibly unnerved. "He's not here right now." Kota flinched. It sounded like 3 people were talking, and it almost seemed familiar. There was Midoriya's voice, but 2 others as well. A man's and a woman's. He didn't like that. He wasn't sure if he should be more afraid of the villain or Midoriya. "Care for a rematch, Muscular?" "Well, how did you know that was my name?" Muscular said. Kota gasped. Muscular? He'd seen that name on the news before. He was the one that had killed his parents. Muscular had killed his parents. Midoriya chuckled, and when he smiled, there was a rush of energy as he began to crackle with green electricity. His 3-voiced laugh was nothing short of chilling. "Oh, Muscular, I don't blame you for not recognizing us. We look a bit different than the last time you faced us," Midoriya said, "but then again, intelligence never was one of your strengths, was it?" "Midoriya," Kota murmured, tugging on his shirt. "I'm scared." Well, it was true. But now there was no denying it. He was more scared of Midoriya than Muscular, yet still, Kota knew Midoriya was willing to do anything to protect him. Even if it was scary. And those other voices, they were so familiar. "It's all right, Kota," Midoriya said, with just the female voice this time. He turned to face Kota, and his face was covered in shades of blue tears. "Now's my chance to protect you, even though I haven't been able to in a while." Kota was sure his heart stopped. "Your voice sounds like my mom's," he whispered. "That's because it is," Midoriya and the female voice said. He smiled, but Kota could see the heartbreak written across his face. "Me and Daddy can protect you because of him." "What are you 2 talking about?" Muscular said, charging towards them. "I'm ready for a fight." Midoriya turned towards his opponent. "You might not recognize us," Midoriya said, "so maybe this will jog your memory." Midoriya held out his hands and a torrent of water shot outwards at Muscular. Muscular was blown backwards and took a minute to get his bearings. "Water hose," he said. "But I killed you." Midoriya shrugged and grimaced. "Yeah, and? How are you? Never mind. I can kill you twice," Muscular said. "It really wasn't that hard the first time." "Ha, really? You guys were so busy trying to save the civilians that you literally let me kill you to stop me from getting them. You were just ruining my fun. You got in the way, so really when you think about it, it's your fault?" "An honorable way to die," Midoriya said with gritted teeth, "but a dishonorable reason to kill." A stream of water hit Muscular in the mouth. "Ah fuck, what the hell is this?" he shouted. He looked at Kota and grinned. "You take after your parents, do ya? You want to die like them too?" Midoriya shouted in rage, and the air around them began to swirl. Rocks began to lift off of the ground. He raised both hands and pushed forward, pushing Muscular backwards into the cavern with the combined force of Midoriya's levitation and water hose water. The force was enough to collapse the cavern on top of Muscular. Midoriya smiled victoriously, but when he looked at Kota, his expression morphed into something more bittersweet. "Kota honey, we have to go," the voices said. Midoriya's face was almost entirely covered in trails of metallic blue tears. "We love you so much, and we're sorry we had to leave you." Before Kota even had the chance to respond, Midoriya sunk to the ground. At first, Kota didn't move. He was still afraid. But then again, Midoriya had saved him. Midoriya and his parents. He rushed over to see if he was awake. "Ouch," Midoriya said with a playful smile. Kota relaxed in seeing that he was back to his old self. "What happened? How were my parents dashed?" "Oh, that," Midoriya said casually, rubbing his temples. "That was my quirk. It's pretty freaky." "Yeah," Kota agreed. "Here, get on my back, I'm going to get you back to Mandalay. Now here's something they don't teach you at hero school. Children are heavy." Now, Kota was pretty small, but Midoriya just wasn't all that strong, and was feeling more than exhausted after being possessed by 2 spirits. Suddenly he saw Aizawa through the trees. Aizawa-sensei. Aizawa rushed over. What the hell happened? You look like you died again. Again? Kota wondered aloud. Aizawa, I need you to take Kota back. I'm not strong enough. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, something others would deem threatening, but Midoriya knew that meant he was just concerned. On one condition, Aizawa said. Anything. You get yourself straight back to camp. No detours. If you try to play the hero, you might make it more difficult for your classmates. Got that, problem child? Straight back to camp, okay? Got it? Alright, I'm trusting you on this, Aizawa said as he strapped Kota to his back with his scarf. Be safe. Aizawa rushed off, using his scarf to swing through the trees like Spider-Man. Midoriya started running. He intended to make good on his promise, he really did. The only problem was that the League of Villains didn't care about promises. And when Mr. Compress ambushed him, Midoriya was too drained to even put up a fight. Needless to say, Midoriya did not come back to the camp that night. No, Midoriya was taken somewhere far worse. When Midoriya opened his eyes, he didn't know where he was. The lighting was dim, but the real kicker was the pulsing pain in the side of his head. His vision was a blurry combination of dark shapes, like he was looking through a kaleidoscope in a nightclub. Midoriya, can you hear me? Hey man, wake up. Midoriya blinked, trying to remove the cloudiness from his head. His arms and legs were chained to the chair he was sitting in. He looked around in search of the voice. Over here, on your left. He turned to look, but he still couldn't see that well. It's me, Ojiro. So that's why the voice was so calming. Where are we? Midoriya choked out. I don't know. My best guess is some sort of hideout. We have to get out of here, Midoriya murmured. No kidding, Ojiro said, uncharacteristically sarcastic. Midoriya scanned the room. It looked like they were being held hostage in an old bar. The walls were covered in dark red paint that was chipped from old age and wear. The floors were wooden and covered in scratches. Midoriya and Ojiro were chained to chairs opposite the bar stools and a large stash of alcohol. That might come in handy if he could start a fire somehow. The door opened, and they both flinched. The first man Midoriya recognized from the USJ attack, and then there was the man with a fire quirk from the summer camp attack. There was also a man wearing a head-to-toe black and white costume, even a mask. There was a schoolgirl who looked deceivingly normal, and after her, no, that couldn't be right. Midoriya saw him die, he saw him die. Miss me? Minetta said with a grin. The girl's arm was around his shoulders. How, Midoriya spluttered. I'm just one of the cogs in a well-oiled machine, he said with a slimy grin. We sprung a trap, and you landed right in it? Midoriya felt sick at the pit of his stomach. So this is the one all for one failed to kill, mused Shigaraki. Ojiro shot a sideways glance at Midoriya, and the message was clear. Be careful, Midoriya. This is no time to take risks. Well, you see, that isn't exactly true, Midoriya started. Something short-circuited in his brain. Ojiro was wrong. This wasn't a tense situation, it was absolutely hilarious. He began to laugh. Ojiro creased his eyebrows in concern and shook his head to himself. What do you mean, brat? Don't play games with me, Shigaraki hissed, but his eyes twinkled with amusement. All for one did kill me, Midoriya said with a grin. He leaned as close to Shigaraki as he could, tugging on his chains. All for one killed me, but I came back. He won't get that chance again. He'd said it quietly, but it sounded like a threat. Ojiro's eyes widened. Reckless, maybe. But I'll be damned, that was badass. Oh, I wouldn't say that, brat, Shigaraki said. I wouldn't mind if he joined us. Hey, that rhymed, shut up. Twice shouted. Dabi tilted his head, listening to something through an earpiece. He nodded towards Shigaraki. Ah, so that means he's ready. Get me Kurogyri, Shigaraki said with a crooked grin. His skin was so dry Midoriya saw his lips split. His stomach turned. You ready to meet all for one, brat? Once the purple smoke was gone, Midoriya didn't know where he was. It looked like some sort of abandoned laboratory, covered in dust and flooded with fluorescent lights. There was equipment thrown all over the room, with wires sparking and shards of glass on the floor. Watch your step, Kurogyri said. Midoriya frowned. He couldn't have been talking to him, could he? They walked through a maze-like hallway to a large room covered in white tiles. Through the dust and blinding lights, he saw someone with light teal hair. The left side of her face was covered in blood. Ragdoll, are you okay? Midoriya asked weakly. He wasn't sure when the last time he ate was, and he wasn't recovered after being possessed by water hose. Shut up, Shigaraki said, putting 4 of his fingers around Midoriya's neck. Shut up if you ever want to talk again. They got you too, she muttered. I'm so sorry, kitten. I wish I could have protected you. That was my purpose and I failed. All of the Pussycats did. So sweet, what a touching reunion. The voice sent an adrenaline rush down Midoriya's spine. It was regal and refined. The voice was so charismatic, you wouldn't be blamed for failing to notice the sinister undertones. All for one, Midoriya said. We meet again, he said. He walked from the shadows into the light. He was very tall, dressed in a designer suit and a grotesque mask that revealed parts of his scarred face. He stood above Ragdoll and held out his hand in front of her face. She started to twitch, as if his hand was pulling something from her. And that's when it hit Midoriya. All for One was stealing her quirk. Stop, he shouted. All for One turned to him with a surprised smile. Don't worry, it'll be your turn soon enough. Ragdoll began to scream in pain. Midoriya tried to squirm out of Shigaraki's grip, but he was strong. And right now, Midoriya was feeling anything but strong. Ragdoll passed out onto the ground. What a useful quirk, mused All for One. It's very important to know your opponent's strengths and weaknesses before battle. Leave her alone. Midoriya shouted. I'm done with her. It's your turn now. I've heard you've got quite the interesting quirk, All for One said. And if it really can bring back the dead, then I've already won. He held out his hand in front of Midoriya's face, just like he had done with Ragdoll. But Midoriya didn't feel anything. Midoriya craned his neck to look at All for One. This is childish. If you're going to torture me, do it. Enough with the games, Midoriya spat. All for One didn't say anything, just remained in the same position. Come on with it. Just do it, you fucking coward. All for One struck him in the face. Kurogiri, bring him to me again tomorrow, All for One said. Midoriya noticed the frustration in his voice and realized what was happening. You can't steal my quirk, Midoriya said with a smirk. His face still stung where All for One hit him. Yes, master, Kurogiri said, and Midoriya's vision was flooded with purple smoke. Midoriya felt numb when Kurogiri warped him back to the bar. He couldn't get the image of Ragdoll out of his head. He didn't react when he was chained back to the chair, and refused to make eye contact with Ojiro. It was like there was a hurricane trapped inside a doll, swirling panic on the inside and blank on the outside. Once Shigaraki and Kurogiri left the room, Midoriya snapped into action. We need to get out of here, Midoriya said. Ojiro nodded in agreement. All for One just removed Ragdoll's quirk. I'm not sure if she's alive or not. If we can get out of these chains, we could either try to find a way to set the place on fire with the alcohol, or break the bottles to get weapons dash. Ojiro said nothing, simply staring. Midoriya couldn't even sense any emotions. What? He snapped angrily. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? Midoriya sniffled, trying and failing to stop the tears. Damn it, he hated being a crybaby, it was so damn frustrating. I don't even know if she's alive, sobbed Midoriya. Ojiro rested his head on Midoriya's shoulder, the closest thing to a comforting hug he could give at the moment. Well, this is nice and all, but we don't all know each other, Kurogiri said. Midoriya flinched at the voice. He looked up and the League of Villains was in the bar. How long had they been there? How long didn't he notice? Cut the crap. What do you mean? Minetta asked. Of course I know them. Dabi smiled knowingly, saying nothing. Well, I invited Midoriya and Ojiro here today, Shigaraki continued. Ojiro gritted his teeth at the use of invited. Shigaraki's eyes darted in different directions manically before fixing on a spot right in front of Ojiro. But I never invited their invisible friend. What the hell are you talking about? Ojiro growled. Midoriya's eyes widened. How long had Hagakure been there? He hadn't even noticed. She was doing so well, being so careful. What gave her away? Hagakure, it's been a long time, Minetta said slimily. You almost got away with it too. But I could smell your perfume. You always smelled so good. Shut up, you pervert, shouted Hagakure. Well, unfortunately, you're the one that won't be talking. Toga? Minetta asked. Do the honors? I've never tasted invisible blood before. I'm so excited, she giggled, drawing a knife. She struck the space in front of Ojiro, and at first, it seemed like nothing. But then Midoriya started to notice things. The part of the bar stool that was see-through. The panels of wood on the floor that were showing the pipes underneath. The speckles on Dabi's jacket that showed the brick wall behind him. And that was when Midoriya realized that it was Hagakure's blood. His skin felt clammy and the nausea was so overwhelming that he thought he might throw up. He tried to shut his eyes, but he just ended up imagining how bloody the room would look if she weren't invisible. Hagakure, shouted Ojiro. Are you still alive? But he didn't receive a response. Ojiro didn't receive a response, BYT Midoriya did. Because all of a sudden, there were 10 nails from a spirit digging into his back. He looked at Ojiro and shook his head. Ojiro, I'm so sorry for what's about to happen, he said quietly. Because he knew he wouldn't be able to stop her. And he didn't really want to stop her. Part of him wanted her to get revenge. She certainly deserved it. Midoriya's body went limp. Look at that, he's so cute. Fainting from a little blood, so adorable. Toga shouted. Minetta's face was white as a sheet. That wasn't fainting, Ojiro said flatly. As if on cue, Midoriya's head jerked up. When his eyes opened, they were invisible. You could the inside of his head, the muscles and tendons, the blood rushing through his veins. He smiled as the tears fell, tracing lines of transparency on his face, revealing the muscles underneath. One of his fingers twitched to the side, and the chains shattered. You're going to pay for killing me, you little pervert, shouted Midoriya and Hagakure. He held out his hand gracefully, and slowly started to raise it. Minetta was lifted off of the ground. Hagakure, shouted Ojiro. He flinched at Midoriya's zombie-like appearance. You don't want to do this, you're not a killer. Midoriya grinned bitterly. He abruptly clenched his fist. There was a god-awful cracking sound, and Ojiro didn't have to look at Minetta to know he was dead. He walked up to Midoriya and put his hands on both sides of his face. You need to stop this, Ojiro said. His voice cracked with emotion. Don't I deserve this? Don't I deserve to be avenged? Shouldn't I be seen for once? You do, but you don't know what you're doing. Think about Midoriya, huh? Do you think he was willing to become a killer? Ojiro said. Midoriya's eyes darted to Minetta's crumpled body. You need to let go. I can't, Ojiro, I can't. I was too young to die. Hagakure shouted. You have to. You know I love you, and I'm telling you, you need to let go, Ojiro continued, despite the tears in his eyes. And for the record, Hagakure, I always saw you. Midoriya smiled and crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Ojiro and the League of Villains were both in shock, standing still and trying to ignore the bodies on the ground. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Did somebody order a pizza? Attention students and staff. We are under attack by the League of Villains. Use your training and get to safety. Yaoyorozu winced from the volume of Mandalay's telepath, but that didn't stop her from immediately making a plan. And a tracker. She knew all she had to do was find a villain and attach the tracker to them. She glanced behind her. Jiro, Ojiro, Hagakure, Bakugo, and Todoroki stood, ready to fight. She had to get to a villain and land that tracker, but she couldn't risk them getting hurt. She didn't doubt their abilities, she doubted their judgment. And she would not let them fall today. Those bastards, growled Bakugo. Smoke was rising from his fists. She noticed the ice start to creep across Todoroki's face. She knew that if she didn't act now, they were going to blindly attack the villains. And they would lose. She would not let them fall today. I have a plan, she stated. She didn't want to give them any room to argue. There just wasn't any time, and it was too risky. All right, let's hear it, Todoroki said coolly. I just made this tracker, she said, holding it up for them to see. I'm going to dash. She trailed off. She felt a chill run up her spine, hearing something rustle in the trees, just a few inches behind her. She whipped her head to the sound. A man was standing on the tree branch. He was dressed like a stage magician with top hat and all, and was rolling a blue marble through his fingers casually. Well now, that's just adorable. You're trying to make a plan to save your friend, isn't that right? Todoroki clenched his fists and Bakugo started to growl. Yaoyorozu shot them a warning glance. Why yes, that's right, she stammered. She was sure to not break eye contact. She needed to show him that she wasn't afraid. The man chuckled, holding the marble between his thumb and pointer finger. Oh well, that's just too bad. You're too late, I've already got him. Bakugo's hands sparked. Why you little dash? With surprising speed, the man rushed down the tree. Bakugo's eyes widened as the man reached his hand forward, about to use his quirk. Ojiro pushed him out of the way, but in doing so, was captured by the quirk. You bastard! I like to think of myself more as a performer, but to each their own, the man said, rolling the two marbles around in his hand. Yaoyorozu flinched when someone put their hand on her shoulder. Trust me, Hagakure whispered. She grabbed the tracker from her hand, and Yaoyorozu was too shocked to react. And in a flash of purple, they were gone. Okay, tell me again. Every detail helps? Yaoyorozu knew Detective Tsukachi was only trying to help, but he was wasting precious time. It was getting on her nerves. Mr. Compress had Midoriya, and he got Ojiro. Hagakure was able to sneak through a portal with one of my trackers. Use that, and you'll find the League of Villains. Use that and we can save my friends. Toshinori looked more depressed than usual in his skeletal state. Yaoyorozu, as my student, as my successor, I need you to promise something for me. His tone was flat, and his voice felt oddly detached. Yaoyorozu nodded determinedly. Anything. I need you to promise that you won't do anything. I know that you're smart and determined, that's part of why you're such an amazing successor. But I need you to stay outside of this rescue mission. Yaoyorozu found herself struggling to fight against tears. Not because she was upset. She was angry. She was really angry. You want me to sit by and do nothing? They didn't just kidnap 3 UA students. They kidnapped my friends. I need to help get them back. You don't understand, Dash. No, you don't understand. If I'd been a little braver, a little wiser, none of this would have happened. None of this would have happened at all. All Might was staring absent-mindedly at the sunset. Tsukachi put a reassuring hand on Yaoyorozu's shoulder. I want you to know, none of this is your fault, he said with a small smile. Yaoyorozu turned her head away, trying to hide the stream of bitter tears she wasn't able to prevent. You're just saying that to make me feel better, she said through gritted teeth. No, I'm not. Let me ask you this. What do you think your role was when the League attacked? Protect the other students and get them back to safety. As All Might's successor, that was my responsibility. That's not true. You're 16. Your role in all of this was to get yourself safe. You did not have a duty to protect your classmates, yet that was your first instinct. You're going to be a great hero one day, but for this mission, leave it to the pros. It is their job for a reason, you know. Yaoyorozu nodded, but it did nothing to ease her anxiety. It was All Might's idea, and Tsukachi agreed it was a good one. If the kids were afraid, it might make them feel a little better. In retrospect, however, both men would agree that it was not, in fact, a good idea. Along with a larger portion of the police and other heroes, All Might and Tsukachi organized a rescue mission to the location on Yaoyorozu's tracker. It was so well planned that they were sure nothing would go wrong. Well, something went wrong, they just didn't know it. All Might took a deep breath, relaxed his shoulders, and with a joking smile, knocked on the door. Did someone order a pizza? He kicked the door open, expecting to see Hagakure, Ojiro, and Midoriya smiling back at him. Happy to be rescued. Happy for a bit of levity. But the scene before him was nothing short of shocking. And in that moment, the symbol of peace could not bring himself to smile. Midoriya was awake, but he was so tired he didn't want to open his eyes. He heard familiar voices, but they sounded muffled, as if they were speaking underwater. It's been a long time. For both of them, said Recovery Girl. I've used my quirk as much as I could. It's up to them now. Both of them? Had they found Ragdoll? Was she still unconscious from having her quirk stolen? And what does that mean? Aizawa said. His voice sounded more tired, more quiet than usual. Are they going to wake up? Midoriya will, but he's been through a lot. Ragdoll and Ojiro filled me in on everything that they knew, Recovery Girl said. So Ragdoll was alright? So who was the other injured person? Oh, I'm so glad, Midnight said. She hesitated. But Hagakure, do you think she'll pull through? Midoriya thought his heart stopped. Hagakure was alive? But she'd possessed him. He didn't understand how that was even possible. Recovery Girl shook her head. There's no real way of knowing. For all intents and purposes, she was dead. But even with the blood loss, the paramedics were still able to resuscitate her. She's been in a coma ever since, and it's hard to say if she's ever going to wake up. Midoriya felt guilty at the pit of his stomach. If only he'd known she was there, then maybe, just maybe, she would have been okay. Hey guys, I'm awake, Midoriya said weakly. He'd done enough eavesdropping. He needed real answers. Midoriya honey, we were so worried, Midnight said. I told you to go straight back to camp, Aizawa said lowly. Why yeah, I tried to but dash. Don't you ever scare me like that again, problem child. Never again, you got that? Yeah, I promise, Dad, Midoriya said sincerely. Dad? Aizawa said with an eyebrow raised. Oh, you know, I didn't even notice, sorry. Don't let his grumpy face fool you, Midnight said with a smile. You just made his whole year. Midoriya couldn't help but smile back. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk with. Midoriya, Detective Tsukachi announced. All Might stood next to him in his skeletal form, looking rather like a deflated balloon. Of course, Aizawa said with a respectful nod, but you could still hear the iciness in his tone. Hey kid, how are you holding up? All Might said, sitting beside Midoriya's bed. Tsukachi stood by the window, tapping his pen to his notepad in thought. If I don't think about what happened, I'm okay, I guess, Midoriya said, trying to bring in a bit of levity. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that, he said solemnly. We were too late. We couldn't save you. You're not the League of Villains. You don't need to apologize, Midoriya said, slightly annoyed. All Might's pitying attitude was starting to grate on his nerves. It is a hero's job to protect, All Might said. He sighed, lost in thought. Are you feeling up for more visitors? There are a lot of people waiting out there to see you. Yeah, that would be nice. It hadn't been a full minute after All Might left that Shinso, Bakugo, and Yaoyorozu rushed into the room. I have a plan, Yaoyorozu said immediately. Her black hair was disheveled and there were dark circles under her eyes. She clearly hadn't slept much since the attack. Geez, Yamamo, Deku just woke up, Bakugo chided. Yaoyorozu frowned, her lips set in a hard line. If Bakugo was the one dishing out common sense, maybe she needed to rethink what she was doing. Hey, how are you doing? Shinso asked. I'm breathing, Midoriya said. He was trying to be reassuring, but only ended up sounding more depressing. That bad, huh? Bakugo said with a scowl. I'm not going to beat around the bush. We're going to take down the League, Deku. Are you with us? Midoriya was so exhausted, he didn't even think he could lift a finger. He glanced down at his hands, half expecting them to be covered in blood. He had murdered someone after all. There was a possibility of it happening again. That was the last thing he wanted. Guys, it's too soon, he's not ready, Shinso said, matter-of-factly. No, wait a minute, Midoriya said. Just give me a couple of hours to think about it, all right? We don't have a couple of hours, Yaoyorozu said through gritted teeth. What are you talking about? Bakugo asked. And if Bakugo was the one being more calm and rational, Yaoyorozu needed to rethink what she was doing. Bakugo's right. This is the kind of thing we can't bear to be rash about, Shinso said. But it's my fault. It's my fault Hagukure's in that coma. Every second I sit here waiting, it's another second I'm not doing anything to avenge her. I was there too, so stop blaming yourself, shouted Bakugo. He lowered his voice to a growl. It wasn't anyone's fault but the League. I just can't stop thinking about her, you know? She's such a good hero already. She'd never even hurt a fly dash. And that's when it hit Midoriya. They didn't know the full story. Guys, you know she possessed me, right? The blank looks on their faces suggested that no, they didn't know. And well, she made me kill Minetta. Bakugo looked stunned and cursed under his breath. How dare you lie about something like that? Yaoyorozu snapped. She would never do something so horrible, and here I was, thinking you were my friend. She was right to do it? Ojiro was standing in the doorway, eyes red from crying. If she hadn't done it, he continued, we'd both be dead. Isn't that right, Midoriya? He nodded in response. Yaoyorozu's angry scowl turned into a terrifying smirk. I need to rethink my plan. Shinso eyed her warily. He wasn't the only one noticing her unpredictable behavior. I'll help you. But right now, there are some other people that would like to see you, Ojiro said. Bakugo, Shinso, Yaoyorozu, and Ojiro left the room, and Mandalay, Kota, and Ragdoll entered the room. Ragdoll looked weak and was in a wheelchair, tethered to N4 with medicine, but she smiled optimistically all the same. Oh kitten, you're all right, she said with a dazzling smile. Yeah, I am. How are you? Midoriya asked, not really wanting to know the answer. Oh, you know, ups and downs, she said, and for a brief moment, there was a crack in her happy facade. But it was gone as soon as it came. Kota just wanted to tell you something, Mandalay said with a small smile. Thanks, or whatever, he mumbled. I guess you saved my life. Yes, thank you, Midoriya, Mandalay said with a sad smile. I asked a lot of you, and because of it you're here now. This wasn't your fault, Midoriya said. Everyone he knew was blaming themselves for what was happening, and that included himself. I do have a question for you, Ragdoll. What's that, kitten? When you used your quirk on me, what did you see? Do I even have a quirk? Or is something else happening? She blinked twice, as if she still had her quirk. Whoops. Old habits die hard, kitten. But don't worry, I remember. Your quirk was unique because of how it manifested. It was a defense mechanism against how you died, and found a way to prevent that from happening again, even though it is unconventional. So it is a quirk. And the whole possession thing, it's meant to protect me, he asked. Good job, kitten, she said, like a mother happy to see a perfect report card from her child. But if I died dash. Oh, you didn't, kitten. Your quirk had to form from scratch and quickly, might I add. Usually a quirk takes years to develop, but yours started much later. I'm guessing you were left in somewhat of a coma while your quirk developed, and you woke up when it was done. That actually clears up a lot. Ragdoll smiled. Glad to see my quirk can help you even though I don't have it. Wait a minute, if you don't mind. Why couldn't Aizawa erase it? Or all for one steal it? Ragdoll shrugged nonchalantly. I don't know. But remember this, every quirk, and every person has a limit, kitten. When Yaoyorozu told Class 1A her plan to take down All for One, she wasn't surprised that most of them didn't agree. This is madness, Iida shouted. And I will not allow you to be so reckless that you don't involve the pros. And yeah, I'm not on board, just saying, Kaminari said. It's way too dangerous. Yaoyorozu's eye twitched. Kaminari was one of the most crucial parts of the plan. If he wasn't there, then nothing could be done. I think you're wrong, Todoroki said softly. I think Yaoyorozu's plan is going to work. You can't be serious, Tokoyami said. You're willing to commit murder for this to work? Todoroki turned to meet Tokoyami's gaze. Absolutely. The real question is, why aren't you? Yaoyorozu, Todoroki, Kaminari, Kota, and Midoriya were the only students needed for the plan. The rest of 1A was an unwilling accomplice to Yaoyorozu's genius. More accurately, her madness. After all, with any luck, there would be 2 murders that night. Yaoyorozu had been able to use the tracker sheet created in the summer camp to track the League's whereabouts. The one Hagakure had sacrificed herself to activate. The League of Villains had a base in Kamino Ward. That's where they lived and grew stronger. And if Yaoyorozu had her way, Kamino Ward was also where they would die. The 5 students walked quietly through the city. They barely spoke, save for a few jokes from Kaminari, who tried to lighten the mood. The problem was, he was so anxious that you could hear it in his voice. It didn't reassure the others. Suddenly, Yaoyorozu stopped in an alleyway. They were close enough. Kaminari fidgeted with the hem of his jacket nervously. Are you ready, Todoroki? Yaoyorozu said, taking a shaky breath. She was relatively calm, considering what she was willing to do for revenge. As long as you are, he replied. He was a bit of a distant person, but in that moment, his unease was clear to see. There was a hesitation in his voice that couldn't be ignored. I am Todoroki, she said. Really? And Midoriya? Yeah. I'm not going to hold back. You ready for that? He nodded solemnly. All right, I'm ready. Todoroki placed a hand on Yaoyorozu's shoulder, and the ice spread across her skin like a spiderweb. When he was done, Yaoyorozu's skin was completely covered in a layer of ice, and she looked glassy, like a porcelain doll. Yaoyorozu's breathing started to slow down, and her eyes closed like she was sleeping. Okay, so far, so good, said Midoriya weakly. Kaminari nodded, but all of the color had drained from his face. It will be my fault if we don't make it out alive. All right, Midoriya, you're up, Todoroki stated flatly. Midoriya nodded grimly, before running out into the street. Hey villains! I found you. Are you going to face me? Or are you going to hide like a bunch of cowards? Midoriya shouted. His voice sounded high-pitched and squeaky, like an angry chipmunk. He wished he were a little more intimidating. Midoriya hadn't been confident in this part of the plan. It seemed too obvious, and he didn't think the villains were stupid or vain enough to fall for it. And sure, Midoriya had gotten on All For One's nerves in the past, but surely he couldn't be so insecure as to fall for such a simple trap, right? Clearly he was wrong. The building in front of Midoriya exploded. Piles of rubble rained down like hailstones, and the scent of smoke and gasoline filled the air. Midoriya stood his ground, channeling his inner Aizawa and pretending to be indifferent. All For One stood in the center of the rubble, loosening his tie like a businessman who'd just come home from work. Well, you've certainly got my attention, he said casually. What is it that you want? An early death? Because that's something I could arrange. I'm going to put an end to this. Your days are numbered, Midoriya said darkly. Oh, is that right? All For One responded with a hint of fear. No, that wasn't exactly right. He wasn't afraid, he was surprised. And perhaps a bit proud. The idea of All For One admiring Midoriya's character was enough to make his stomach churn. Yeah, that's right. Your villainy ends tonight, Midoriya said, with more bravery than he actually possessed. But the words sounded hollow, almost like a mockery of something a real hero would say. But you don't really believe that this will help? That killing me will make you, what, some kind of hero? Such childish ideas are beneath your intelligence. You're better than that. Your powers come from death and destruction. You're trying to use them for death and destruction. You're foolish to think you have the makings of a hero. What are you implying? Midoriya said, indulging him. He needed more time. Yaoyorozu wasn't ready yet. He'd be lying if he said All For One's words weren't getting under his skin. You're on the wrong side, child, All For One said. He walked forward, and Midoriya had to do his best not to flinch when he held out his hand. Join us. You were always meant to. Midoriya smirked. All For One raised an eyebrow, and Midoriya crumpled to the ground like a sack of potatoes. All For One took a step backwards, momentarily caught off guard. Midoriya started to rise off of the ground, like a marionette pulled by a string. His head raised, and when he opened his eyes, they were a bright, glowing white. His tears were like molten metal. When he smiled, there was intelligence and mania in his expression. Maybe Midoriya's powers are destructive, but my powers aren't, Midoriya and Yaoyorozu said. All For One staggered backwards. One For All has never defeated me in battle dash. But this isn't just One For All. We have the combined powers of life and death. You don't have a chance. Midoriya raised his arms. There were sparks on his forearms as something began to move under his skin. A rattlesnake materialized from each arm and slithered down to the ground. Please listen, friends. Kota whispered. Go over to that villain and bite him. Todoroki was worried Kota had said it too quietly, but sure enough, the snakes made their way over to All For One. All For One began laughing, a deep, hearty chuckle. He almost sounded like a man, and not an immortal supervillain who lost his soul to time and sour convictions. You really think a couple of insignificant reptiles are going to take me down? I knew you were foolish, I just didn't know how entertaining it would be to watch you fail. Those are no average snakes, Yaoyorozu and Midoriya said. One bite you die. And you're going to be bitten twice. All for One raised his hand to launch a fireball, collapse a building. It didn't really matter. He was too late. The snakes had wrapped around his legs and bitten him. He dropped to his knees. Impossible. All for One and Midoriya sunk to the ground at the same time. One of them would never stand again. Kaminari, now, shouted Todoroki. He used his left side to melt the ice on Yaoyorozu. Kaminari flexed his fingers, and electricity raced across his palms. He pressed his hands to Yaoyorozu's chest. Yaoyorozu wasn't breathing. Again, Todoroki said. Kaminari sent another charge. Yaoyorozu still wasn't breathing. Kaminari glanced at Todoroki for guidance. Kaminari was trembling from fear. He couldn't let them down, not now. Not when they had won, not when they were so close. Again. Aizawa had failed as a teacher. More than that, he'd failed as a hero. In fact, all of the heroes failed, and the worst part? Aizawa was the only one willing to own up to it. Endeavor, All Might, it didn't matter how high their rank was. Because no hero was brave enough to admit they were wrong. They hid behind their iconic faces and pretended they could do no wrong. They weren't willing to admit to their mistakes. Aizawa was determined to change that. Because it was clear, the heroes had failed. They'd made the world feel so hopeless that a group of children, his students, felt they needed to take the law into their own hands and murder a supervillain. And they hadn't just done it out of fear, they'd done it for vengeance. They'd done it because Hagakure was lying in a coma at the hospital, and they didn't know if she'd ever wake up. And the heroes hadn't saved her either. Aizawa vowed from that moment forward that he'd never let his students feel hopeless again. When Midoriya opened his eyes, he recognized the fluorescent lights and quiet beeping sounds of a hospital. He realized he frequently woke up in hospitals. He decided he didn't want that to be a pattern. Hey, the damn nerd's awake. Bakugo shouted, a foot from his face. Midoriya groaned. If he hadn't been awake before, he sure as hell was now. He thought Bakugo's voice could break the sound barrier. Midoriya had a headache, like he was suffering from a really bad hangover, and frankly, Bakugo's shouting wasn't helping. You've really earned Aizawa's title of problem child, Midnight said with a mischievous smile. How are you feeling, kid? Tired? I got a headache? Well, to be fair, you were possessed, Shinso pointed out factually. Alarm bells ring out in Midoriya's head. How's Yamamo? And Todoroki? And Kaminari? And Dash? They're all fine, Aizawa stated. You should thank Iida for that. Midoriya looked to Iida, confused. I was only doing what was right. I told Aizawa-sensei about the plan as soon as we were done. Because it was fucking bonkers, that's why. And you also got the police to pardon them, Aizawa continued. Yes, that's also true. Midoriya didn't know what to say, and stared at Iida with surprise and gratitude. Oh, don't look so fucking surprised. You may have broken the rules, but I know why you did it. When can I see Yaoyorozu? Midoriya asked. He was glad Kaminari was able to shock her back to life, but he couldn't imagine she was doing that well. You need to rest, problem child, Aizawa said. You'll have plenty of time to talk to her. You need to get some sleep. Before Midoriya could say he wasn't tired, his eyelids shut and he fell asleep. Yaoyorozu, you're all right, All Might said. He was in his skeletal form, and his voice matched how exhausted he looked. He looked surprisingly small, sitting in the chair beside Yaoyorozu's hospital bed. Yeah. What you did was dangerous. I know that, she said curtly. There was a pause before All Might continued. You did something no holder of One for All has been able to accomplish. You defeated All for One. You're going to be a fantastic mentor for the next holder, Yaoyorozu? No, I don't think I will. All Might blinked. Pardon? One for All ends with me. No, you can't dash. Actually, I can. I'm no idiot, I know how dangerous this power is. I know it's affected my brain, my judgment. And if it has this extreme an effect on me, it would be selfish to pass it on. Not to mention, One for All strengthens with each passing. So, no, I will not pass it on. All Might hesitated. All right then. If one for all must end, I'm glad it ends with you. He patted her on the shoulder, turned on his heel, and walked out of the room. Yaoyorozu smiled softly, turned off the lamp next to her hospital bed, and went to sleep. 1 month later, the world was shocked when All Might announced his retirement. Led by Aizawa, a large group of pro-heroes including Midnight, Present Mike, Gran Torino, and the Wild Pussycats started a movement to reform hero society and make the safety and education of rising heroes become the top priority of hero schools. Class 1A had recovered from the summer and were more united than ever. Yaoyorozu hasn't used one for all since she killed All for One, and her mind is clearer than it had been in months. Todoroki has come out of his shell a little, and Iida makes everyone laugh by saying the things he used to keep inside his head. Shinso, with the support of his classmates, especially Midoriya and Uraraka, has fully accepted his quirk. Bakugo has become aggressively friendly as opposed to aggressively arrogant. Midoriya, for the first time in his life, truly felt like he belonged. And every day after school, Ojiro goes to the hospital wing and sits next to Hagakure, waiting for the day that she opens her eyes.